record.
Recording in progress.
All right, good morning, everyone. This is the Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021 morning session of the Portland City Council. Keelan, good morning. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, your flexibility, and your understanding as we manage through this challenging situation to do the city's business. With that, we'll hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Good morning. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the city council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at that time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you're a lobbyist. If you're representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded.
Thank you, Lauren, and good morning to you. First up is communications. Item number 398, the first individual, please.
Request of Grady Preston II to address council regarding police oversight.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. It's so wonderful to see the Police Commissioner, Ted Wheeler, again, the Police Commissioner overseeing the Bureau with the highest increase in police brutality incidents across the nation over the last 4 years. It's great to see him tweeting about the horrific ramifications of police brutality. Unfortunately, his contributions don't end with hollow lip service. He claims all violence is unacceptable, yet he continues to employ known white supremacists from out of town so they can suit up in PPB gear and gas peaceful members of our community. When you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, do you see the faces of the people murdered by your officers during your tenure? These 13 names here? Or since you receive less than 47% of the vote, do you not consider them your constituents? Is that why you only take meetings from the PDX Business Alliance? Hundreds of my neighbors now walk the streets with very real and deep pain from the brutality of 4 years of your PPP overship. Under your leadership, we have seen kneecaps, skulls, and faces shattered by police batons, arms and legs fractured by tear gas canisters, seizures induced by weaponized strobing flashlights, dozens of women who now have extremely painful and irregular menstrual cycles, and people with new cases of asthma from your lack deployment of chemical weapons on our streets. We have seen cops routinely dogpile on single peaceful BIPOC protesters. We've been forced to watch horror as cops repeatedly mace handcuffed citizens while they're lying on their stomachs, gurgling in screams of pain. This physical and emotional trauma is the only real contribution you have managed to provide in your term. And I encourage anyone listening to reach out to Total Recall PDX or any other organization working to recall Commissioner Ryan and Police Commissioner Wheeler for the repeated and egregious failures. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you for your perspective. Next up, 399, please.
Request of Shannon Cogan to address council regarding clean and safe contract.
Good morning, Shannon.
You know what? It looks like Shannon may not be connected yet.
All right, if she connects, we'll bring her on at the end of communications if she's on by then.
Okay.
Next individual, item 400, please.
Request of Aurelia Marine to address council regarding Zenith. And I don't see that Aurelia has joined us yet either.
Okay, how about Elijah, item 401?
Request of Elijah Cetus to address council regarding increase of crude oil trains through North Portland arriving at Zenith.
Good morning, commissioners.
Morning.
My name is Elijah Cetus. I'm a first-year law student starting in the fall at Lewis and Clark, and I'm here to testify on behalf of Portland Harbor Community Coalition in opposition to Zenith Energy's recently submitted land use compatibility statement. Representing over 30 organizations and coalitions, PHCC's mission is to elevate the voices of the most impacted people in the Portland Harbor Superfund site. Along with the burdens of industrial pollution and toxic contamination, people of color, low-income families, and the unhoused in North and Northeast Portland are most likely to live near the rail lines and in the path of crude oil trains moving to the Zenith terminal. You've heard many powerful and personal testimonies on this issue, so without repeating them, I want to remind council that in 2019, the last time I was in City Hall, we filled 3 rooms with community members, and you received over 6,000 hand-signed signatures calling to stop Zenith's oil trains. This came on the eve of the 20,000 person youth-led climate strike. I'm so glad to see the youth here today. Every member of this council has either publicly opposed Zenith's oil trains or signed on to Sunrise Movement's endorsement letter affirming your opposition to the terminal. We've heard some questions from members of your staff in meetings about why we're opposed to Zenith and not the other terminals in the hub. To be clear, the entire critical energy hub puts the river, the Superfund cleanup, and our communities in grave and immediate danger from the risk of earthquakes, spills, and explosions, as well as air pollution, which has already left St. John's and Linton residents with some of the highest rates of asthma in the state. As a member of the Braided River campaign, PHCC is organizing with residents to call for a transition of this infrastructure in line with our climate goals and our vision for a green working waterfront. We urge you to reconsider promises made in 2019 to expand community right to know, to reinforce industrial fire brigades, and to require seismic retrofits of the fossil fuel terminals. But that takes time, and the moment to stop Zenith is right now. DEQ is requiring a land use compatibility statement from Zenith because they inherited their permits as an asphalt facility, then misled regulators and began moving crude oil by rail. They have increased the number of trains through our city every year. In 2018, they moved 14 million gallons of crude oil. In 2019, they moved 167 million gallons, more than a tenfold increase. In 2020, in the pandemic, they moved even more trains. 10,213 rail cars moved through St. John's. That corresponds to 1 unit train every 3.5 days. You have the responsibility right now to decide whether crude oil should be part of the future of our city and whether it meets our ambitious visions and our high standards in our comprehensive plan. I think this is a profoundly hopeful moment because we're being called to ask, when does the city have the right to say no? When do we have a right to say what we want? Tomorrow, June 3rd, is the 5-year anniversary of the Mosier oil train derailment, when a unit train of Bakken crude derailed in the Columbia Gorge, causing millions of dollars of damage and forcing residents and an elementary school to evacuate. It was fortunate because it was a rare June day when the wind was not blowing in the gorge and the plume of toxic contaminants rose gently to the sky. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., community members will be gathering at Cully Park to mark this event and to speak out against the continued expansion of crude oil at Zenith. I urge you to attend. And I further urge you to open up a public process for this land use compatibility statement. This is a key part of Oregon state land use laws, and it should have community voices. We also urge you to oppose the crude oil expansion. Do everything you can to stop this terminal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if I could just comment on this, because we've had a number of very good speakers come in over the last couple of weeks on Zenith. First of all, thank you for doing your organization for this weekend. I'm sorry I will not be able to attend that for a variety of reasons, but I want you to know that philosophically I'm there with you. I also want to state again clearly for the record that I am strongly opposed to any increase in the number of oil trains either going through our urban areas or through the Columbia River Gorge, and that's both for safety as well as environmental reasons. And as the City Council, of course, we have an obligation to do things legally as prescribed through the zoning process. We have to hold everybody to the same standards. But I hope you have also noticed that we have enforced those standards with diligence, and it's my expectation that we'll continue to do so in the future. But I just want to tell you, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate others who've brought that perspective not only to us on the City Council, but obviously through the City Council to a broader audience. So thank you for that. Just wanted to say so.
Thank you.
Next individual, please, Keelan.
It looks like 399, Shannon Cogan has joined us. Would you like to go back to 399?
Yeah, sure. Why don't we hear from Shannon, and then we'll go to 402.
Okay, 399, request of Shannon Cogan to address council regarding clean and safe contract.
Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. You sound good.
Oh, good. Sorry. I was trying to call in earlier and the telephone didn't work apparently. So glad I had time to download Zoom here. So I am here to address you all about the Clean and Safe contract renewal, which is this year. I am here as a part of the group that has been asking for a open and public transparent process throughout the contract renewal. And we would like to just update council that Mayor Wheeler, your Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing has released its downtown core recommendations. So from the community, they are asking regarding clean and safe that we remove the ability of enhanced service districts like clean and safe to fund PPB sworn officer positions. So right now, clean and safe employs a number of sworn officers in the Clean and Safe District. Additionally, they want to remove private security patrols from public spaces. So private security is able to patrol our downtown sidewalks and public spaces, even though they have even less accountability than Portland police do. And like the first speaker, there are numerous incidences of police brutality and private security overreaching their quote unquote duties, I guess I would say. And there's no way for the community to have input to hold them accountable for police brutality that will continue after Mayor Wheeler is done and has a long legacy before you were mayor. So I think our group would really like to open up this process. OMF has just hired someone to start with community engagement. And as we've seen from the PSEP recommendations, the community wants to have a say in this process. We have been able to meet with Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Rubio, Commissioner Hardesty, Commissioner Maps, and Ryan. We would like to meet with you to discuss these things. So please reach out. We have been in touch, but haven't been able to meet yet. So we still want to make sure that our community demands of town halls that are accessible outside of business hours happen, that there's specific engagement with communities that are left out of these processes historically, and that there is a city council meeting where public comment is heard. These contracts command millions of dollars in the downtown core, and so the community deserves a say. Right now, Portland Business Alliance exclusively runs the Clean and Safe contract. Even though Clean and Safe is supposedly a separate entity, they contract with PBA for all of the services. So anybody who has a contract is actually signing it with PBA. And that is a business alliance. It's not a community alliance. It has no accountability from us for how they spend that money. And so we'd really like to change this process and continue engaging with you all to make that happen before another 10-year contract is signed. And it doesn't have to be a 10-year contract. That could change too. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. And I'm going to get to Commissioner Hardesty in a moment. I did have a question. Have you had an opportunity to raise these concerns with the PBA? Have you reached out to them?
We have not communicated with PBA. We would welcome them to talk to us about it. And they can do that if they want to, but we have not received any indication that they would want to change how the contract is, because they hold all of the power and money. Why would they want to change that? You all oversee the contract. So it's really you who have the power and opportunity to make this change.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that. My question is merely whether or not there's been a meeting of the minds here, that there may be some different perspectives or some compromises or some sort of an agreement that could be hammered out before this comes back in front of the City Council. I was just wondering, as a concerned citizen, whether you've had that opportunity, and it sounds like you have not at this point. And if you'd like to meet them and you think that would be useful, it may not be useful. I have no way of knowing, but if I could help facilitate that, I'd certainly be willing to try. Commissioner Hardesty has her hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Shannon, for your testimony today. I just want to appreciate your organization, who 3 years ago started having this conversation about the Clean and Safe project. And I want you to know that the early organizing around this renewal of the contract, I think we've been really clear. Let me just speak for myself. I've been really clear that the next Clean and Safe contract will not pay for police officers, will not pay for assistant DAs, and will not be a slush fund for the Portland Business Alliance. And so I do think that we are at a moment in time where, Shannon, your group's input is really vital. I know that there will be community meetings, and I would really encourage you to bring as many community members as possible to come to those meetings that are going to be set up. But I also would take the mayor up on his offer and call Portland Business Alliance and ask them to meet with them directly, to actually put on the record with them directly what your concerns have been. And let me just say, I share all the concerns that you've raised, and I've had that concern long before I was sitting on the City Council. And so we have an opportunity to make this EID better than it has ever been in the past. And we're using a CEIC model as the gold standard. It's 100 times better than any of the ESDs we've had in the past. But it also could be better. So I look forward to you, Shannon, actually, and your group really informing this process. It is at the very beginning stages, but I've set some clear guidelines of things that I just would not accept. And I put those on the record here with you today. So, and I'm also happy to help you facilitate a meeting with Portland Business Alliance if you'd like. And again, thank you for being here, and thank you for really the detailed work that you did that led to the auditor taking up ESDs and providing us with very detailed information around the ESDs. And thank you also for your continued advocacy to make sure that as we move forward, that we have only one system of justice and not two, one for business owners downtown and one for everybody else. So thank you for being here, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. And the next individual, I believe, Keelan, if I got this right, is Sean, item 402. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right.
Request of Sean Looney to address council regarding Zenith Energy on behalf of Linton Neighborhood Association.
Hi, my name is Sean Looney, and I'm representing the Environmental Committee of the Linton Neighborhood Association. Linton currently is home to more than 200 million gallons of gasoline, diesel, liquefied natural gas, and various other highly flammable substances. In Linton, we're looking at the Zenith Energy permit application in a very personal way. In the realm of what could possibly go wrong, we know too well that among the many factors that make us vulnerable, one, there's a major fault line that runs along the railroad tracks parallel to St. Helens Road, where we live. Two, much of our community sits on highly liquefiable soil near the Willamette River. Excuse me. Three, we're due for the Cascadia subduction earthquake. And four, rail cars move through our community sometimes several times a day. Many of those rail cars hold enough fuel to ignite any number of catastrophes. All of these possibilities are in addition to the daily air pollution that already enters our lungs from unfiltered diesel trucks, railroad locomotives, thousands of passenger vehicles, and the off-gassing from the petroleum tank farms. In summary, Linton strongly objects to Zenith Energy's application, and we feel it's time for Portland to help us make our quality of life better and not worse. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate your being here. All right, we are at, well, let's do the consent agenda first. Keelan, have any items been pulled off of the consent agenda?
We've had no requests.
Please call the roll on the consent agenda.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the consent agenda is adopted. Next item, time certain 403.
Proclaim May 31st, 2021 through June 18th, 2021 to be Rose Festival Hope Reigns celebration.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. The Portland Rose Festival has been an integral part of our city's history and culture, serving the community for over 114 years. Over the last century, the Rose Festival has seen and survived it all. So it was no surprise how quickly the festival was able to pivot their operations to stay afloat during the COVID-19 pandemic. The foundation was able to answer to the financial challenges of the COVID-19 through a combined strategy that included dramatic expense reductions, acceptance of federal stimulus funds, and successful partnerships with their corporate sponsors. I'm really thrilled this morning to be celebrating the resiliency of the Rose Festival and look forward to the work we'll do to celebrate Portland in the next year. And today, what's really awesome is that we're joined by the Rose Festival staff, board members, and most importantly, the 2021 Rose Court. Thank you for being here. And with that, I turn it over to Executive Director Jeff Curtis for a short presentation. Thank you, colleagues. You're in for a wonderful experience as you get to know the young women representing our city. Take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Thank you for your work as our liaison to City Council. Mayor Wheeler, distinguished council, it's my honor to speak with you today as the CEO of the Rose Festival Foundation. I want to thank the city for this proclamation and celebrating Rose Festival season, even at this season is not the season that we all wish for and desire for with our large events taking place. I want to thank the council for its budgetary support, for our annual request for just a little bit of funding that helps us get over the line to do what we do and create the magic in Portland. You know, I want to tell our story, and Commissioner Ryan did a really good job of that. And he asked me a question yesterday: how do you feel about this second year in this pandemic? And my honest answer was proud. I'm proud of our organization's resiliency and our ability to create this theme of hope and provide inspiration in our community without the big events taking place. And let's be clear, it's been really challenging times for an industry, lots of industries, the events industry in particular, and the Rose Festival Foundation as the leader of Portland's event industry. To give you perspective, 2020, we had a dramatic decrease of revenue of over $5 million and a net operating loss of just under $500,000. That's the result of a quick about face not being able to produce our events in 20. What I'm here to tell you is that those are numbers, but they don't show the spirit and resiliency of the organization through community engagement and support that we've been able to rally and produce. and make this week. As of today, those numbers are less relevant because here's what is relevant. We didn't use our line of credit that we had available or our reserves. We made very difficult decisions, reduced our staffing, payroll reductions, amongst many things that ultimately ensure the Rose Festival Foundation has the ability to make its way through these challenging times. And I'm here using the word pride and proud that I'm here to say to council, as we proclaim this festival as happening this year in its altered way, that we are standing on firm ground to produce Portland's official festival in the scale and scope that Portlanders can embrace in 22. But in the meantime, the festival experiences continues right now. And we did last year with a lot of success. Most notably, we introduced the Porch Parade, which is a concept that has been replicated by festivals and cities across the country, most notably Mardi Gras in New Orleans, to our friends in Washington, D.C. with their National Cherry Blossom Festival. The Porch Parade, a little more to that in a minute, but introducing the Porch Parade, engaging our neighbors and our communities to celebrate Rose Festival season in a different way. We have done virtual Fleet Week. We have our treasure hunt, all elements that are part of this year's festival that we did last year as well. So the hard part for us was, what's the platform going into 2021, knowing that we couldn't do 20? With community engagement as the centerpiece, the Rose Festival Court, which you're going to meet in a moment, is that key ingredient for us. That ingredient of quality young women that represent the best of Portland. Having that as our pillar and doing some virtual events and Crying the Queen in Washington Park and doing our Porch Parade, the Rose Festival season is alive and well this year with this runway to 22 coming soon. Briefly about our Porch Parade is that if you haven't seen or heard about it, this is the simple concept of asking our neighborhoods and our homeowners and our residents to celebrate Rose Festival at your home through the unique decoration of your garden, your porch, or your entire yard. And we've seen it all. Over 400 installations across Portland are being created as we speak and will be up through June the 13th. Thanks to Commissioner Mapp's office and partnership with Venture Portland, we've introduced the Porch Parade to businesses this year to get neighborhood businesses engaged, all for the idea of bringing the festival to the neighborhoods versus the old model of having a festival and making people come to us. The future is bright when it comes to engaging the community in that way, but also producing large-scale events in the near future in 2022. So that is a festival that we're celebrating. Porch Parade, the court, the traditions that matter, virtual Fleet Week, and our treasure hunt. But I get asked about what's on the horizon for 22. And as I stated, the financial base through really tough decisions, good management, and pride in our organization, the pillars are there for us to springboard this effort into planning for 2022. And here, as your official festival, there's going to be no bigger event, though while events industry is starting to reopen over the coming months, and people are coming out, the 2022 Rose Festival with over 1 million guests coming downtown or celebrating in their respective neighborhoods will be Portland's big family reunion. And the size and scope, we'll fill our hotel rooms with travelers again, and we'll reopen downtown. I ask this council and your support in that effort as we take the time to celebrate now, acknowledge who we are, but at the same time, get ready for a festival that will really showcase Portland in its right way in 2022. We are really excited about this runway. Last but not least, I'll just share that while we have worked on our own organizational structure during these COVID times, we have focused a lot about coming out of the COVID era, who we are from an internal standpoint that will translate it externally. And what I mean by that is our efforts in diversity, equity, equality, things that we can do as an organization that reflect the values of everyday Portlanders and do better with it. And I'm happy to say that our efforts will result in some significant adjustments internally that will be reflected externally to the results of our DEI committee that's in the works right now. So with all that said, it's about people that run the Rose Festival Foundation. And our events reflect those people. And as your CEO in partnership with our COO, Marilyn Clint, and staff, we rely on tremendous volunteers to really make it work. And it's my privilege and honor to introduce the volunteer president of the Rose Festival Foundation, Mr. David Todd. Quickly about David Todd, and this says something about Rose Festival. You're not handpicked to be president. You're not some significant person in our community that automatically is president. You work your way through an organization of community spirit and time and effort. And Dave is a great example of that as a member of our community that has been dedicated his time and his effort and his life to Rose Festival to be president with you today. So I want to introduce Mr. Dave Todd, the president of the Portland Rose Festival Foundation. Dave?
Good morning. My name is Dave Todd. I have the honor of serving as the current Rose Festival Foundation president. Rose Festival is also one of the longest running parts of my own story. Though I've long considered myself an Oregonian, I wasn't born here. My family came to Oregon in the early 1950s, and I grew up in and near Eugene. I came to Portland in 1964 for college, began seeing the world with college overseas study in Mexico, thanks to Lewis and Clark College, found my forever wife, also thanks to Lewis and Clark College, joined the Navy and saw the world from Europe to the Philippines and Vietnam. Came back to Portland and settled here for careers, multiple, family, and Rose Festival. Like many, I can identify multiple threads in my life story that run in parallel and that are strong and long enough to constitute career tracks. My personal collection of careers has included personal education, service as a Navy officer, information systems development with banks, and teaching, spanning the years from 1964 through 2017. The community service volunteerism thread began with my first involvement with the Rose Festival back in 1974 and continues today. Newly returned to Portland, I began volunteering for the Rose Festival by helping host the Canadian Navy. After 15 years as a volunteer on multiple committees, I was elected to the board in 1989. Over the following 30 years, I served in most of the officer positions on the executive committee and as a member of half a dozen committees each festival season, chairing several over the years. To date, my participation in this great festival spans more than 40% of the history of the festival. In more down-to-earth terms, I started volunteering the year my son Ian was born, so it spans his entire lifetime. He is truly a Rose Festival lifer and an off-time festival volunteer himself. 2 years ago, in another age, my wife Kathleen and I celebrated our golden wedding anniversary. Forever does continue. Less than a year ago, we traded in our empty nester status to become a multi-generational family again as our son, daughter-in-law, and grandson moved to our home to provide a bootstrap for their efforts to eventually become homeowners themselves. Sadly, we lost our daughter-in-law, Jamie, to abrupt and rapid non-COVID illness just weeks after they joined us. So now we are providing needed family support as Ian and Henry begin an unanticipated rebuilding of their lives. During a school year forced online by the pandemic, we've had the opportunity to help make distance learning enjoyable and productive for a third grader. Henry has had an overabundance of grandparentish tutoring surrounding him at every turn. Much of it has been a learning experience for everyone involved. Gaining proficiency in submitting homework by taking pictures or making videos, then uploading the files, fighting with Zoom, exploring math concepts in new ways, seeing current events through an 8-year-old's eyes, and then analyzing who is the villain in Jack and the Beanstalk and why. Constant contact grandparenting of a cheerful, inquisitive chatterbox has added lively variety to the long months of lockdown. As the lockdown has begun to ease, we have enjoyed our ventures bit by bit back out into the world as a family. An unexpectedly adventurous road trip recently took us right into a late spring Sierra snowstorm. When parades again become a reality, I hope you'll see Ian and Henry riding with Kathleen and me on the back of a convertible. Early in May last year, while we all were trying to work out what kind of festival was possible in 2020, I found some inspiration in an essay titled Department of Essential Work, a piece exploring care of botanical gardens in this time of pandemic. My paraphrase of its message describes our overall sense of commitment to care and feeding of the festival. The Rose Festival is as much about the people who come to it as it is the events we produce. All of us do feel a sense of loss as we look back on the year that spun out of control and changed our festival so dramatically. Even so, those of us who work and volunteer for the festival remain grateful that we can be part of the world's best festival and that we remain well and able to contribute to festivity and joy in the very special and beautiful place that is Portland. That opportunity comes with a pay-forward obligation. We must do everything we can do to make sure that the festival does what it needs to do whenever people are able to return to it. We want the Rose Festival always to be an opportunity for new celebration and not a reminder of what was lost. My intention as I began my term as Rose Festival president was to lead from the future, not from the past. And that's exemplified by the establishment of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee that Jeff mentioned. The future is what we make of it. I look forward to working with all of you to see what we can make that future look like. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a key member of our board, a director I've worked with for many years, a co-chair of the court committee, and my vice president. I am so pleased to introduce Contessa Diaz-Nicolaides.
Good morning. Once again, my name is Contessa. I serve as the vice president of the Rose Festival Board of Directors. It's a true honor to speak to you today about my Rose Festival journey. It began nearly 13 years ago in a small meeting room of a corporate building off Airport Way. My son Andreas was just a few months old at the time, and so I asked if I could bring him along. And after 2 hours of listening to very complex program logistics, I knew at that point that I would join the team as a volunteer. Just a few weeks earlier, a close high school friend had expressed her excitement about a volunteer opportunity with the Rose Festival and thought it would be a fun activity for me as well. And we felt it was a full circle moment together as nearly 15 years earlier, we both stood together in front of a panel of judges, hoping to be selected as the princess for St. Mary's Academy. Born and raised in Portland, the Rose Festival Court was always a well-esteemed position and that seemed sometimes unattainable and impossible for me to pursue. And as a very young child, I can remember just like yesterday, walking through the Lloyd Center Mall, staring up at the larger-than-life photographs of each princess, and I remember thinking, could that be me? Neither of us were selected as the princess for St. Mary's Academy that year. However, we both will tell you now that the experience was worth as much as the title. The preparation, the process, along with those we met, made the opportunity a win in itself. And although our disappointment certainly outweighed the feeling of gain that day, we now see the gifts it provided us. And although we cannot claim the title of past princess for St. Mary's Academy, we both return each and every year as the Rose Festival past president and vice president to encourage the students to definitely apply. Serving in the important role of one of Rose Festival's 6 officers, you might ask why I continue to work with the Rose Festival Court. Well, I believe what we do with the Rose Festival Court and the young women in our community is our most important work. This work places hope, it places encouragement, and it places support in the hands of our future. These young women who sit before you today, Council, they are our future. The Rose Festival volunteers are just like you, people with jobs, people with families and personal issues and choices to make. And this last year has presented many challenges for my family. The unimaginable loss of life, the COVID pandemic in the eyes of a 27-year airline employee, seeing thousands of my fellow employees out of work, and the everyday worry that came with seeing my 13-year-old sequestered in his room for most daylight hours, just trying to stay engaged and trying to stay successful with his schoolwork. That newborn baby I brought in my arms to my very first Rose Festival court meeting. He now sits 6 feet tall with his curly hair. He's a teenager living in a world much different from that of his younger years. And I'm so proud of the young man Andreas is, And I can't wait to see what happens in his journey ahead. However, at times I say I'm scared for what he may have to face in the years ahead. The conversations I've witnessed others say to their children, well, those are now the conversations I say to my own. And the challenges of politics and race added another level of complexity for my family. And I want my son to be aware. I want him to be aware, but I want him to be inclusive, and I want him to be non-judgmental. How do I teach my son that while he sees everyone the same, not everyone sees him the same, and that is not his fault? I search every day for the magic answer. What is it? But for me, the answer lies somewhere in the area of having hope. The Rose Festival Court and the youth we have served for over 100 years, they represent this hope for me. I see hope in these young women that sit before you today. Their aspirations, well, they include law, architecture, social work, mental health, medicine, environmental engineering, and working with LGBTQ+ and minority communities. These are amazing, amazing young women, and they are our future. They represent hope for me. And while the Rose Festival cannot take credit for the good works these young women have done, they've earned it. We can provide the mentorship, and we can provide the scholarship support to help them pursue their dreams, whether it be small or whether it be large. Each year, I reevaluate my own commitment to the Rose Festival Court Committee I joined just under 13 years ago. Volunteering comes with a sacrifice, as it adds to my already long work days, my work schedule. I have to balance the added stress of being a mother, being a great employee, and being a Rose Festival leader. But for me, my commitment rests in the eyes of each of these young women, in my son, and in the youth of today. This is where hope lies. The investment of time I find each year I give to this program because it is worth every single sacrifice I have made. In the Rose Festival Foundation and in the court program, I see hope for youth, I see hope for our future, and I definitely see hope for our community. And I'm so grateful to the Rose Festival for providing that amazing vehicle for our community as hope reigns here in the city of Portland, and it does. So now it is my true pleasure to introduce to you the 2021 Rose Festival Court. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We're the Rose Festival Court presented by Unitas Community Credit Union, and we're proud to represent Portland's official festival and be with all of you today. Hi, I'm Natalie Mathers, and I'm representing Parkrose High School. I'm hopeful that my studies at the University of Oregon will give me the tools to improve the lives of those who are struggling in my community.
Hi there, I'm Lily Rosebrook, and I am the Metro West Princess representing Valley Catholic High School. I am motivated by delicious food, and I love to cook for my big and boisterous family. If I could have you over for dinner, I would cook you my Nana Yvonne's Cuban-style arroz con pollo. ¡Qué delicioso!
Hi, my name is Zamzam Hussein, and I'm representing Roosevelt High School. I'm excited to pursue a path in medicine and to make the community thrive not only physically and mentally, but to make an inspiring impact.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Din, representing David Douglas High School. I aspire to always find the good in others and become the best version of myself that I can be.
Hi, I'm Faith Istabor, representing Leotis V. McDaniel High School. I am dedicated to community engagement because I want to help people grow and thrive together in productive and inclusive ways.
Hello, I'm Jiwon Lim, representing Lincoln High School. I'm dedicated to bringing about a more humanitarian future for everyone with my studies at Johns Hopkins University next year.
Hi, I'm Rena Marthaler. I use she, or they pronouns, and I'm representing Cleveland High School. I'm inspired by women in STEM and my passion to change the world for the better, so I hope to study environmental engineering.
Hi, I'm Beatrice Santiago Perez. I am representing Grant High School. I am passionate about my future and becoming a social worker. And to become a social worker, I will be attending Portland State University.
Hello, my name is Kayla Pierce. I am representing Jefferson High School. I am passionate in my future career in creating a safe space for LGBTQ and minority communities in discussing their mental health.
Hello, I'm Sophia Chen. I'm a senior at Benson High School, and I'm determined to address large-scale issues like climate change and homelessness through my work in the future as an architect.
Hi, my name is Catalina Montero. I'm representing Ida B. Wells Barnett High School, where I'm a senior and I use she, her pronouns. I aspire to nurture my community through service in the medical field with kindness, empathy, and a smile.
Hi, my name is Andrea Brazil. St. Mary's Academy High School. I'm hopeful that my studies at the University of Oregon will bring hope to the student I one day aspire to teach. On behalf of the Portland Rose Festival Court, we would like to thank you all for coming celebrating the 2021 Hope Reigns Portland Rose Festival. Thank you.
Wow, that is your court, and that is Portland. And I'm so proud to have them join us today. Mayor Wheeler, I'll give the agenda back to you for the proclamation. I want to really appreciate council's leadership and support.
Well, thank you very much. And again, it's so great seeing these amazing young women. Commissioner Ryan and I had the opportunity earlier today to meet with them. And I just continue to be blown away by your passion, by your intelligence, by your focus on community. So I'm really excited to be here today. Just a few brief remarks before I get to the reading of the proclamation. Then I'm going to turn it over to some of my colleagues as well prior to the reading of the proclamation. So the Lewis and Clark Exposition set the stage for Portland to become the City of Roses back in 1905, when the city of Portland planted roughly 10,000 bushes of what were called the Madame Caroline Test-Out rose. This breed, which is a hybrid tea rose, was named after a very popular French dressmaker back in 1890. The roses themselves, meanwhile, helped Portland stand out as a city because of their immense beauty, attracting visitors and newcomers alike, while also boosting the local economy. Due to the success of the exposition, the Portland Rose Festival was established formally in 1907, helping to showcase the city's cultural vibrancy, as well as an ideal climate for rose cultivation. I think we can all agree to that. Portland's reputation as the City of Roses was already well established by the First World War, when European rose hybrids were threatened by various bombing campaigns. Then in 1918, English hybridists sent many varieties of roses to Portland for safekeeping, leading to the establishment of the International Rose Test Garden. Today, Portland's reputation as the City of Roses permeates through almost every aspect of our cultural life, from the Sufjan Stevens song, The City of Roses, to my declaration of Portland as the City of Roses in virtually every proclamation that's read in front of the Portland City Council, from the various places named for roses and signage with rose symbols, to our world famous Portland Rose Festival. Portland always has been and will forever be the City of Roses. Before I read the proclamation, I'd like to hear some comments from my colleagues. I see Commissioner Hardesty is up first. Commissioner Hardesty, good morning.
Good morning, Mayor, and good morning, all. I want to thank you, Jeff. As always, a stellar job. I am very grateful to both the President and Vice President, Mr. Todd and Ms. Diaz Nicoladas. I think, my apologies if I messed it up. You know, each year that you come in front of the city council, I think I can never be more impressed. I'm like, this is the most impressive group of young folks I've seen in quite some time. And every single year, I'm wrong because it's always better and better and better. What I've heard from you young ladies today is this desire to make your community better. And whether you're going to do it through medicine, whether you're going to do it through teaching, whether you're going to do it through community service, I am just so in awe that all of you have this passion for service. That's what we need. We need this generation to be all about service. I'm getting teared up and I don't even know why. I think because I'm just impressed so much with your passion, your vision. And I just can't wait to see what you do next. And I want you all to know that City Council has elections every 2 years. And so when you get out of school, maybe you want to think about coming back and running for Portland City Council. I hope you maintain your optimism and your passion and your desire to do good. You will go through a lot of places where people will tell you, you can't do this, you can't do that. Ignore them. Follow your heart, follow your passion, and you will have great things in your future. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Rose Festival Court, for just finding the best, the brightest in our community and giving them an opportunity to shine early. I look forward to seeing what you do next. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Mapps, good morning.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, colleagues, I'm delighted to join you in declaring May 31st, 2021 through June 18th, 2021 to be our Rose Festival Hope Reigns celebration. As the mayor mentioned, Portland hosted its first official Portland Rose Festival in 1907. 114 years later, the Rose Festival is still going strong. Of course, this year, because of COVID, the Rose Festival looks a little bit different, but it still looks great. This year, I'm particularly excited about two Rose Festival events. First, as we heard earlier in today's presentation, we have Porch Parade. Because of social distancing this year, we won't have our traditional Rose Festival parades. Instead, we will replace those with Porch Parade. In Porch Parade, as you heard, Portlanders decorate their porches and yards with themes celebrating the Rose Festival. This year's theme is Hope Reigns. Last year, more than 400 homes participated in Porch Parade, and this year, for the first time, the Porch Parade will include small business storefronts. I encourage every Portlander to go out and check out Porch Parade. You can find a map for Porch Parade by visiting the website for the Portland Rose Festival. That's www.rosefestival.org. And there's a second Rose Festival event that I'm really excited about too. This year, like every year, I look forward to hearing from Portland's Rose Festival Court. As Commissioner Hardesty noted, we are so lucky to have members of the court with us here today. Since the 1930s, Portland's Rose Festival celebration has included appointing a Rose Festival Court comprised of up to 15 students chosen from Portland area high schools. Now, for the next couple of months, these young women will be our ambassadors who will reintroduce Portland to the world and reintroduce Portlanders to each other. Recently, I read the speeches members of our Rose Festival Court delivered on their hopes for this year's Rose Festival, and I'd like to just take a moment to share a couple of passages from those speeches. For example, Faith from McDaniel High School said, "This past year has been anything but normal, but continuing the traditions of the Rose Festival will give hope to the community." Zim Zim from Roosevelt said, "As the city reopens, the Rose Festival can reassure Portlanders that they're not alone, that we as a whole community can and will get through rough times together." Lily from Valley Catholic said, "As the world opens up, Rose Festival can be a beacon of hope by showing that communities can still gather safely and celebrate what makes all of us special. And Jennifer from David Douglas reminds us, now that the world has slowly and cautiously been reopening, the Rose Festival brings so much hope to the community. I too share these hopes for this year's Rose Festival, and I know that we all do. And that is why I am so glad to join with all of you in celebrating this year's Rose Festival. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Rubio, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Ryan, for bringing this proclamation forward today. And a very special appreciation to my friend Jeff Curtis and also Marilyn Clint and all the staff and volunteers for their years of service and to generations of Portlanders through the Rose Festival celebration. I had the honor of working very closely as a city liaison with Jeff years ago, and it was absolutely one of my most favorite parts of the job. And it's such a pleasure to be able to reconnect now at this time on this very special occasion. And to the women of the Rose Court, big congratulations to each one of you for all of your accomplishments and all of your leadership. You are part of a very special tradition that has counted numerous city and national leaders in the court alumni membership. And I'm so proud to know that you're representing our city, and we're thrilled to honor your service and your contributions today. And this Rose Court is incredibly representative of who Portland is today. And that is personally meaningful to me and to all of our communities that are represented today. And hearing your aspirations and your values are so inspiring, and it gives all of us hope. A lot has happened in the last year. And at this time last year, there was a lot of fear and uncertainty. But here we are a year later, and the events that we know that we're taking precautions this year with events and adapting all the celebrations. But I have to say that spark of excitement marked by the Rose Festival every summer is coming back. And it's especially meaningful because it also marks our reemergence as a community from a hard time and into the future. So on behalf of all of us, I just want to say thank you for reminding us that, like our community, the Rose Festival is resilient and it's coming back strong. And I'm already looking forward to 2022. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. Commissioner Ryan, good morning. Again, it's good to see you.
Good morning. I did have the opportunity to connect with the court earlier, and I mentioned to them that I just woke up with the biggest heartache because I think a lot of you know I'm just a ridiculous, passionate fan, and that word is fanatic. So it makes you a little crazy. So I was yelling at the television late last night and just was so bummed when we lost that game against that other team. And so, but it instantly went away when I was around all of you this morning. And I just, I feel like hope is definitely reigning. I want to start off by commenting on you, Dave. It was so refreshing that you told us your story. And I just know that Ian and Henry are so blessed to have a grandfather like you. And so thank you for sharing your humanity and for being an amazing volunteer. That's hope that reigns. And to Contessa for your leadership and providing mentorship to this amazing court just by being yourself and by giving it your all every day to help them through this journey. And Jeff Curtis, I really appreciate your steady leadership. I also appreciate your openness. I'm not the easiest person when it comes to ideas. They just never stop. There's not a status quo I've ever accepted. And so I really appreciate your tolerance as we continue to think out loud together, as we reimagine how the Rose Festival will continue to evolve. And nothing shows how it's evolving more than all of you that are on this court. Earlier today, I heard a deeper, I spent more time with you this morning, so I had a chance to listen to your questions. And we really had a theme this morning about mental health. And it was so refreshing to be with a group of leaders that were already have lifted the stigma, something that people older than them have to work on really, really diligently for us to move forward as a community. So whether you're going to be a teacher, whether you're going to be a medicine doctor, whether you're going to be an engineer, knowing that all of you have a heart and soul focused on removing the stigma of mental health really gave this lifelong Portlander who has dealt with mental health issues their entire life in my family so much hope. So I'm looking forward to being at the Queen's Coronation at the Rose Garden in a couple weeks. I look forward to getting out of bed early and being with all of you and celebrating the beauty of our city that really comes from the inside out from each and every one of you. So thank you. The city needs you. We need your representation. You show the best side of Portland. Be bold, be loud, and of course, you're always gracious. Anyway, thank you, and hope definitely does reign. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. And with that, I will read a proclamation on behalf of the City Council. Whereas in 1905, Portland Mayor Harry Lane called for an annual festival to put Portland on the map and brand it as the City of Roses. And whereas the Portland Rose Festival was created in 1907 with a mission to drive economic activity for the region, celebrate Portland's incredible rose climate, and provide citizens with a common celebration. And whereas today the Portland Rose Festival is still produced by the nonprofit Portland Rose Festival Foundation with a mission to serve families and individuals with programs and events that promote the arts, education, volunteerism, and community. And whereas on January 13th, 2010, Portland City Council unanimously adopted a resolution naming the Portland Rose Festival as the City of Portland's official festival. And whereas the Portland Rose Festival continues after 114 years to provide an opportunity for people from all backgrounds, experiences, and cultures to join together to celebrate Portland's rich diversity and common humanity. And whereas today the Rose Festival continues to create connections amongst all parts of the Portland region, despite not being able to produce its popular large-scale events due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas from May 31st through June 18th, 2021, the Portland Rose Festival will offer the community creative ways to celebrate, including virtual Fleet Week, the Rose Festival Porch Parade, the Rose Festival Treasure Hunt, and the Queen's Coronation. And whereas on this day, in the presence of the Rose Festival Court, the 2021 Rose Festival will be a springboard for Portland's continued recovery in the weeks and months ahead with the theme, Hope Reigns. And whereas the city may anticipate the return of its official festival to its former size and scope during Portland's Rose Festival reunion, May 27th through June 12th, 2022. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim May 31st, 2021 through June 18th, 2021, to be Rose Festival Hope Reigns celebration in Portland, and encourage all residents to learn about the festival and participate in its events celebrating our city. Thank you. Applause doesn't quite work the same way, but thank you again, ladies. You did a tremendous job, and thank you, Jeff. Thanks to your whole team. Thanks to your volunteer board, the foundation, everybody. We wish you all the very best. Thanks for lifting our spirits during a difficult time and giving us great hope and confidence in the future. Thank you all. Colleagues, next item is 404, time certain.
Proclaim the month of June to be City of Gardens Month.
Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very excited and honored today to introduce the City of Gardens proclamation with Mayor Wheeler. Anyone who has been out walking recently and enjoying the warm weather can't help but notice all the explosion of blooms, roses, irises, rhododendrons, following tulips, wisteria, and cherry blossoms. So we're so lucky to live in a community where we get to enjoy these beautiful flowers. And we are incredibly fortunate to have many gorgeous gardens across our community. And most Portlanders will likely be familiar with the International Rose Test Garden, the Japanese Garden, Lansu Chinese Garden, and Leach Botanical Garden. And our gardens also include the Native Gathering Garden, a recent Indigenous landscape restoration project at Thomas Cully Park, and also the Portland Memory Garden, which was a garden compassionately designed by volunteers for those individuals experiencing memory loss. All of these public gardens feature not just spectacular plants, but these beautiful and serene places also represent the diligent and ongoing support of countless volunteers and generous donors. And last year, Portland Parks Foundation developed the first comprehensive guide to these gardens. And I would encourage everyone to access it on their website and to take the time to visit these community treasures. So today we have a few guest speakers from some of these gardens listed in that guide to share a few words and a short video. And to start us off, I would like to turn it over to Portland Parks Foundation Executive Director, Randy Gregg.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, other commissioners. I'm really honored today, especially really humbled by following the Rose Festival proclamation and being introduced to these incredible young women. But I want to pull the lens back and recognize that the Rose and the Rose Festival are sit within a context that is also larger, that we're really more widely a city of gardens. And June, as the commissioner said, is when the city is at its most resplendent. Nearly every yard, every neighborhood is in bloom. Even our weeds look nice this time of year, as I can personally attest. But as a culture, Portlanders have a particularly powerful expression of our collective horticultural ethos in our public gardens. A lot of metropolitan areas around the globe have 1 or 2 or 3 great gardens. We have more than 19 sprinkled across greater Portland. And as the commissioner said, they range from our internationally renowned to local gems. They were born of many impulses, from horticultural obsessions like the roses to giving folks suffering from dementia safety and joy. So last year, the foundation and its supporters thought it'd be a great service in the pandemic to create the first comprehensive guide to these riches and on a website that is cityofgardens.org. And this year, we invite you to join us in celebrating these resources with a proclamation. And we can kind of consider it as a practice run for next year, when Portland will be host to thousands of public garden devotees when the American Public Garden Association holds its annual conference here. So I'd like to introduce 3 colleagues to share their perspectives on the importance of these gardens. First up will be Steve Bloom, CEO of Portland Japanese Garden. Then Raymond Cheng, who's the board chair of Lansu, our Chinese garden. And then Courtney Beckel, who's the volunteer program director at Johnson Creek Watershed Council and works extensively with Leach Botanical Garden. So take it away, Steve.
Thank you, Randy, and Mr. Mayor and commissioners. Thank you for having me here today. And for this recognition of public gardens is an important part of Portland's greater landscape. Often, I'm sorry to hear the trucks going by in the background, my apologies. Often I think we forget to take stock in what we have here in Portland. And I think the pandemic was an opportunity for us to really value more highly these public gardens that we have. When we were stuck in our homes, to still have a place to go where we could be outside in a safe setting and enjoy nature and the beauty of these gardens, I think was really very critical to the community. And we see that the recognition is coming now from across the country and across the world for the investment that we have made in these gardens. When we put into bid for the American Public Gardens Association National Conference, it was not just the Portland Japanese Garden that allowed this conference to come to Portland, but it was the depth and breadth of all the gardens here in Portland as a team moving forward with this proposal to host the conference that won us this very, very important conference. For our part, the Portland Japanese Garden is not just a garden, but it's a place where the community comes together to have important conversations about the inclusion of all people, about mutual understanding between peoples. And those are the basis, that's the basis on which we were founded, to the point where we're not just a garden, but we've become the largest Japanese cultural center in the world outside of Japan. The American Public Gardens Association 1 year ago awarded its highest honor, voted by 600 public gardens across 20 countries, to the Portland Japanese Garden with its Garden Excellence Award. And we are just one example of many, many public gardens that are of the same quality and stature in this community. And so this recognition is really, really important to us. And thank you for being here today and doing this with us. Thank you.
Raymond?
Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Rubio, Commissioner Hardesty, Commissioner Maps, and Commissioner Ryan. My name is Raymond Chang. I'm the president of the board for the Lanshu Chinese Garden. It's amazing the city of Portland has so many beautiful gardens, for the people in our community to enjoy. I think there's many cities in US and around the world. I can honestly say Portland is definitely on top of the list. Portland has established a sister city relationship with Suzhou, China since 1985. The Chinese garden has a very important cultural exchange symbolism between the two cities. We are so fortunate to have such an authentic Chinese garden that was built by the artisan from Suzhou, China in year 2000. There's no other city in US that has an authentic Chinese garden except for the Huntington Garden in Los Angeles. I've personally been to the Chinese garden in Suzhou, China. And I think our Chinese garden is even better than the garden there, Maybe I'm biased, but it's a true statement, Every time I step into the Lanshu Chinese garden, I get that wonderful feeling of calm and peacefulness. The plant, the pond, the Chinese architecture, and the koi fishes really create such an oasis for the visitor to enjoy. I'm proud that the Lanshu Chinese Garden can join with other gardens to make Portland as a city of garden. And it's even more fitting to proclaim June as a City of Garden Month. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Courtney.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Courtney Beckel and I'm the volunteer program manager at the Johnson Creek Watershed Council. So we work to restore Johnson Creek with the help of the community, and we do that on many, many natural areas in Portland and surrounding areas. But one really incredible project I wanted to tell you guys about today that I have the pleasure of working on is a 5-partner collaborative. It's a restoration project at the Leach Botanical Gardens in Southeast Portland, and Johnson Creek runs right through it. So the partners in this coalition are the Leach Botanical Garden, Friends, the African Youth and Community Organization, the Blueprint Foundation, Wisdom of the Elders, and the Johnson Creek Watershed Council. So these 5 partners share a goal to restore several acres of neglected land at the gardens to native habitat while providing valuable learning opportunities for youth and a connection to the land that we return to again and again. And so the Leach Botanical Garden is the special place where this coalition can plant and care for the vegetation, monitor wildlife that actually indicates the success of the project, and teach and learn all with each other. So each partner is able to pursue their own goals within these bigger goals, such as developing environmental literacy and mental health skills through mindfulness for the African Youth and Community Organization interns. It also includes workforce development skills for Native adult interns from the Wisdom of the Elders group, and pursuing science, technology, engineering, and math careers for Black youth with the Blueprint Foundation. So I've personally worked with interns, youth, and students who are astonished to learn under the microscope how plants actually have sex. They love finding strange and beautiful aquatic insects that tell us how clean the creek is by their presence, and traditional ecological knowledge of native plants that are in the garden. So these youth then become mentors and share their knowledge with incoming students. So needless to say, this is a really unique project that I'm honored to be a part of, and that we definitely could not undertake without the uniqueness of the garden itself. So this project at this garden means so much to so many, and it's just one example of how gardens can play a meaningful role in hands-on environmental learning and community building right here in the heart of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. I think that's just one example of the many interactions that happen in each of our gardens across the region. And so we really wanted to just pull the lens back and recognize that, that we sit in the Willamette Valley and this incredible, resource of the valley, the soils, the climate, and that the important role that these gardens are playing in shaping our culture and in our shaping of their cultures. So with that, I'd like to play a little video that we put together and turn it back to Commissioner Rubio.
I've always considered Portland to be a city of gardens. When you look at the landscape of the city and the breadth and depth and diversity of the different kinds of public gardens alone that we have here, it's really quite remarkable. Whether it's the Rose Garden, the Lan Su Garden, the Hoyt Arboretum, we have these world-class gardens that are known everywhere, and they were built by the community, for the community. And you drive around Portland neighborhoods, and what do you see? You see these amazing gardens that people put their heart and their soul into, that they tend to every single day. We are a caring, nurturing community, and that is represented in the landscape that we have built and that we've chosen to live in.
Portland Parks Foundation believes this landscape of public gardens makes Portland a city of gardens, and we're celebrating this with an official proclamation that henceforth Portland be called a City of Gardens, and June will be City of Gardens Month. Of course, cultivation and stewardship of our fertile landscape began with indigenous peoples who lived on and cared for these lands long before there was a Portland. Their stewardship continues in the form of indigenous landscape restorations like the Native Gathering Garden at Cully Park and the Oak Savanna Project at PSU. But as the city developed, so did an extraordinary collection of public gardens cultivated from community passions, from the International Rose Test Garden to neighborhood gems like Dunaway Lilac Garden or Tanner Springs Park, an artificial wetland in the city center rich with native blooms and pollinators. Or take Leach Botanical Garden in outer East Portland. It was started by John and Lilla Leach, a pharmacist and a botanist 90 years ago on a former pig farm next to Johnson Creek.
Johnson Creek had been heavily logged, and so it was quite an open space and an environmentally probably damaged place. When we look at it now, to me, it's an incredible ray of hope.
Public gardens in an area of climate change are really here to showcase plants, natural plants in their natural environments that are being threatened, that are going away. There are many plants from around the world that'll do just fine in our temperate climate, and so we can help by preserving those plants and putting them on display as part of an educational effort for people. People have to know about plants and understand what it takes for them to thrive in order to be lifelong stewards of conservation and the environment.
Each of our public gardens has a story, and each offers richly layered experiences. Consider Lan Su, our Chinese garden. It began as a cultural exchange between Portland and Suzhou, China, another place known as the City of Gardens.
I do think that that is somewhat unique amongst the gardens in our city. The fact that we are one square block in the middle of the city, and you come inside of our walls and it is just this amazing immersive experience. We're also really focused on engaging visitors in educating people about a richly authentic Chinese culture.
Several years ago, a friend of mine told me he was going to go into, bypass surgery, quadruple surgery, He was really worried about his life, and stuff, whether he can survive through it. And the day before his surgery, he came over here, he said, I feel so calm. So that really kind of like, wow, this God really have a sense of, his purpose.
Lest we forget, we sit in the Willamette Valley, where thousands of nurseries grow Oregon's second largest agricultural export, beautiful plants and trees for gardens across the world. In the valley's heart, just a short drive away, we can enjoy historic gardens like the Lord and Shriver Conservancy or the Deepwood Museum. And where else but Portland would there be surprises like the McMiniman Brothers Kennedy School in Edgefield, where you can enjoy a brew and a burger enveloped by amazing gardens of native plants.
One of the other, I think, great elements of the public gardens in Portland that is unique from other public gardens around the country is that we understand the ability of these gardens to be able to teach and share different cultures with different people. So it's not just about the beautiful plants, it's not about the landscape, but it's about understanding each other. It's about mutual understanding. When you look at the Lansu garden, when you look at the Japanese garden, these were born out of a desire to understand each other as Americans, as Chinese, as Japanese, and come together as human beings. They're gardens of humanity.
Portland Parks Foundation is proud to welcome you to Portland, the City of Gardens.
Great. Thank you so much, Randy and everyone for your presentation. Steve, Raymond, Courtney, as well as the Portland Parks and Recreation staff and countless volunteers who help steward our public gardens. Throughout the pandemic, these gardens offered places for solace and rejuvenation, as you can tell. And now as our region begins to open up, these amazing horticultural and cultural spaces deserve our celebration and our care. We're truly a city of gardens, some large, public facing, and many small or personal or communal. And whatever your interest is, there is a garden out there for you. So thanks again to our guests who presented today. I'm so proud to be Parks Commissioner and get to see firsthand the great care that goes into these gardens, and I'm honored to be part of this proclamation today. So Mayor, we'll turn it over back to you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Rubio. As we know from both this item and the previous proclamation for the Rose Festival, Portland is very well known as the City of Roses, and it still should be. It's a tradition here, but there's a vast world of public gardens that Portlanders have built, they enjoy, they care for, and that visitors from all around the world come to see as well. And that oftentimes we spend too much time really celebrating individually. Widening the lens a bit to look at these gardens as a collection and a collective expression of our culture is important to how Portlanders see themselves and how we can collectively see Portland. Public gardens are incredible expressions of beauty as well, but they also play an increasingly important role as our climate changes, educating people in horticultural diversity, change, as well as stewardship. They can play important roles in global cultural exchange, as with the Japanese garden and Lansu Chinese garden, but also locally. It's amazing that during the pandemic, we completed a $10 million public-private partnership to expand the Leach Botanical Garden far east of I-205, started 90 years ago on a former pig farm. Our City of Gardens cultivates beautiful plants and landscapes, but also creates important community connection. And I'd like to call on my colleagues before I read the proclamation. First up, please, is Commissioner Mapps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Rubio and colleagues. I'm delighted to join with you today in declaring June City of Gardens Month. As we've heard through today's presentations, Portland is home to some world-class public gardens, including the Bushes Pasture Park, of course, the classic Crystal Springs Rhododendron Gardens, Deepwood Museums and Gardens. McMenamins Edgefield has great gardens. Same thing with McMenamins Kennedy School. Let's not forget Hoyt Arboretum. Ladd's Addition is a classic space and close to my heart. We've seen a lot, heard a lot today about Lansu Chinese Gardens, and we can't forget Leach Botanical Gardens, Pittock Mansion, Peninsula Park Rose Gardens, Portland's Japanese Gardens, the International Rose Test Garden was probably, a world classic. The Lilac Gardens over at Denaway Park, the Oregon Garden, Portland's Memory Gardens, which is, if you haven't seen it, I very much encourage you to go check that out. And of course, Tanner Spring Park. If you want to learn more about this amazing collection of resources, I encourage you to visit the City of Gardens page on the Portland Parks Foundation website. And I too would also like to take a moment to thank the American Public Gardens Association for choosing Portland as the location for their 2022 annual meeting. We look forward to hosting those folks next year, and thank you.
Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Rubio, for bringing this forward to the dais today. I really had no idea that June was the City of Gardens Month, and that's one of the joys of being on this City Council is every week you find out about another important item to take a breath on. I found your leadership on this, Randy Gregg, was really noted. I loved how you brought in leaders from the different gardens, Steve Bloom. You probably have the best Zoom staging I've seen since I've been in office. It's beautiful. And thank you for your work at Japanese Garden. Randy Chang, I love that you got competitive and said that the Chinese garden here is better than the one in China. A lot of ambition. Portland needs more of that. And Courtney, I'm excited to say that just last night, didn't plan this to be timely, but I had the joy of being at Leach Botanical Garden. And thank you, Director Long, for hosting me and Joanne. It was spectacular. And I was really taken with the wisdom of the elder stories. It was great to see the work that's been going on, the restoration there. And anyway, I just can't wait to continue to frolic around the city and notice what a gift it is to live in a city that has so many incredible gardens throughout. I just have to plug a little tip that helps me, and that is the OSU Extension Office puts out a monthly to-do list for your own garden. You can see that this is a good month to do some major trimming of your rhododendrons because they just blossom. That's just a little tease so that you too can click onto the OSU Extension Service. And this comes from a duck plugging an Oregon State University product. I want to end by saying how important gardens have been for me personally and for so many people in the city, especially over the last year. I don't know what I would have done without walking over to the Peninsula Park Gardens and seeing neighbors and people I haven't run into, say, in 6 months because of this pandemic. And just to see us early in the morning smiling as we walk through the park. Also, I'm blessed to have a backyard with a lot of garden varieties. And I'll tell you that after a tough meeting or a tough week, that's what it's like to serve. I think in 2021, we have a lot of crises that we're managing. And I know for me, if it wasn't for going out and being with my garden, for example, this weekend, the highlight of my weekend was eating some fresh strawberries and raspberries in my garden. Watching the tomatoes take off in this heat over the last 2 days is spectacular. So it's those little things that allow me to slow down and restore my own soul as I connect with the garden. So I hope that each and every Portlander has that opportunity with our public gardens to have access. And I hope our neighbors continue to take care of one another and share our knowledge about gardening. I know that I learned so much from my neighbors when it comes to gardening tips. Anyway, I'm really glad this was on the agenda this morning. Thank you for allowing us to take a breath on such an important topic.
And Commissioner Hardesty, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Rubio, for this very timely resolution. I'm always thrilled when I learn something new on this council. And today I had no idea that we had so many well-known gardens in the city of Portland. And I have to say, for me, I think going to explore the roses have been a highlight every year, especially this time of year, in many, many different areas of the city. When I first moved here, I thought people garden like all the time in Portland. It's like it is an obsession with people who are always actually gardening. I used to think there was something wrong with me. But the good news is that I get to benefit from all the hard work that people put into creating just these beautiful environments throughout the city. So I greatly appreciate Commissioner Rubio bringing this acknowledgement today, and look forward to every year being reminded of the beauty that surrounds us here in the City of Roses. So thank you very much for the resolution. Thank you all for the great work. Let me just say I was really thrilled to hear about the partnership with the African Youth Organization, as well as with Wisdom of the Elders. They have been just a fine community partner for decades, and it's wonderful to see the connection to restoration of the land using elder knowledge of our native population. So I can't say enough good things about roses and flowers and gardens, and look forward to seeing what happens next year at the conference of all these smart rose people that will be in town, maybe giving us a couple of lessons on how we can keep our roses going much longer. Thank you again, Commissioner Rubio, for this timely resolution.
Very good. Thank you, colleagues. Now I will read a proclamation on behalf of the Portland City Council. Whereas Portland's gardens exist on lands nurtured by Indigenous people, where the blooms of native plants are seasonal reminders of their stewardship. And whereas Portland, Oregon is home to more than 15 extraordinary public gardens within city limits. And whereas some of these gardens, amongst them the Portland Japanese Garden, Lanzhou Chinese Garden, and the Rose Test Garden, are known throughout the world. And whereas Portland sits within the Willamette Valley, home of the world's greatest collection of nurseries, and to other public gardens like the Oregon Garden, Bush Pasture Park, and Deepwood Museum and Gardens. And whereas, in an era of climate change, public gardens serve as respites from heat, repositories for many native plants that are disappearing, and corridors for pollinators, birds, and wildlife. And whereas, in times of pandemic, public gardens are places to enjoy beauty and calm while physically distanced. And whereas, in times of social unrest, public gardens are places for all Portlanders to reflect and find solace in nature and seasonally changing beauty. And whereas, community volunteers, partner organizations, and city staff work to preserve and enhance our public gardens. And whereas, in 2022, Portland will host the American Public Garden Association's annual meeting, bringing thousands of public garden experts to our city. And whereas, in the spirit of inclusivity, the language of gardens and lessons they teach need no translation. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Gardens, do proclaim the month of June henceforth to be City of Gardens Month in Portland, and encourage all residents and visitors to visit our fantastic public gardens. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Keelan, next up is item 405. Please, time certain.
Accept the Office of Equity and Human Rights 3-year strategic plan.
Thank you, colleagues. Today, we have the opportunity to learn more about the Office of Equity and Human Rights strategic plan. The Office of Equity and Human Rights plays a unique role in our commission form of government, working with bureaus across the city on policies, programs, and investments. City Council charged this office to promote equity, reduce disparities, and work to resolve issues rooted in bias and discrimination through research, education, and interventions. I believe this report comes at a critical time, as I'm sure you do too. This is a time when our city, of course, is grappling with how we can come together to build back our city better than before and make it a city that truly works for everyone. I want to commend the Office of Equity and Human Rights resolve, particularly Dr. Webster's, to bring this strategic plan to the City Council. I'm looking forward to this presentation, and now without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Webster. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Mayor, Commissioners Hardesty, Mapps, Rubio, Ryan, colleagues, and guests. For the record, my name is Dr. Markeisha Webster, and I'm the Director of the Office of Equity and Human Rights and Special Advisor to the Mayor on issues of racial justice and equity. It is a pleasure to present to you today the Office of Equity's strategic plan. In full transparency, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, racial injustice was consuming Black neighborhoods across the country. The wildfires were destroying the beautiful Oregon landscape. I was being threatened by white supremacists, trying to hold my team together while being physically apart for the unforeseeable future, and adapting to my new normal of being a single mother working full-time at home with 2 young children all day. I was not sure we would get to this point. However, I was determined that this work would continue. And while not perfect and certainly not static, but a dynamic document, our office would bring this report to council in spite of it all. I want to thank every community member and city employee, specifically directors, 2 of which are here today to offer support. Thank you, Directors Bless and Durbin, and equity managers who have continued to champion our office through the years and in this moment. I want to say a special thank you to the Office of Equity staff. They are a team of dedicated equity warriors, unmatched anywhere. Kofi, thank you for being here today, Kofi, my Deputy Director. Jeff, Tatiana, Danielle, Grace, Kapua, Yolanda, Judith, Nicole, Jonathan, Theo, Claudia, CJ, Layla, Melody, Lex, and Sweta. Thank you for believing in me and more importantly, believing in this work. I would also be remiss if I did not give a special thank you to former Commissioner Amanda Fritz and her office over numerous cups of tea. I shared my vision for this work and she did everything in her power to support it. And as many of you have heard me say before, I do this work with a focus on my why. And that why sometimes shifts and changes. Today, my why is my sister, Brittany, a beautiful Black young woman and mother who is battling mental illness. I promise my sweet sister, I will continue to wake up every day trying to chip away at systems of oppression. All right, and with that, I'm going to share my screen. We've got some slides here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that okay. I can get a thumbs up. Sure, okay, here we go. So the Office of Equity and Human Rights, as many of you know or may not know, was born out of a community vision and really a mandate that there be a focus internally about what the city's equity initiative would look like, right? Sort of getting our house in order. And so there was, so many over the last 10 years, important initiatives and support and guidance that the office has provided. And I think this is year 10. And so it's really awesome to be in this space and to be celebrating today this monumental step in the work that we've been doing. In 2018, there was a stakeholder engagement process prior to my coming into this role as a director in February of 2019. And that stakeholder engagement process involved community-based organization leaders, city staff, and elected leaders as well. And so few of the things that the stakeholder report revealed was there were lots of good work that was happening in the office. And that included our racial equity 101 training, the leadership and sort of guidance around bureaus creating their racial equity plans, our budget equity tool was a budget equity assessment tool, it's a mouthful, and supporting just overall the city's equity work. The stakeholder report also included some areas of improvement for our office, and those really included some suggestions around how we could continue to deepen our equity work within bureaus, to think about workplace equity and to do that in collaboration with our Bureau of Human Resources, support for our commissions. Many of you know we have the Human Rights Commission currently on hiatus. We are trying to reorganize ourselves and bring that back, as well as what was our Portland Commission on Disability, which we are also in the process of regrouping. And so it's continuing support for our commissions, our relationship with the community, and then finally this recommendation around structural and systemic changes to really strengthen the Office of Equity's work and to really increase our authority. That was one of the major themes that was coming out in that stakeholder engagement report. One of the other things that I think that's worth noting is there was this challenge of whether our focus was internal or external. And while primarily internally focused, our work cannot happen. And I've said this since the beginning of my tenure and time here. It cannot happen and has to be informed by the communities we serve, and specifically communities that have experience in equities and services and supports from our city. And so we do our work with our communities in mind and with support from community, with advice and recommendations and guidance from community. And all of that drives the direction that we go internally. Our strategic planning process started in the fall of 2019. And here we are today with our sharing at City Council. So as I mentioned before, we were created by city ordinance in 2011, and I won't read all of this, but you can get a sense of, at that time, what the office was charged to do. And our areas of work include equity training, equity tools. As I've mentioned, our budget equity tool is one of those tools, our work on Title VI and Title II, disability equity, our Black Male Achievement Program, our Human Rights Commission. We have our equity communications as well. And so there are lots of programs and really exciting things that have been happening in the office over the last 10 years. And we just continue to grow. We have a lot of new folks that have joined us in the last couple of months. And so really excited to continue advancing this work. One of the other important pieces that I think I want to share is we've often been asked what our role is in the city of Portland. And so as I thought about information from the stakeholder report, engagement here at City Council, engagement with bureau directors and our equity managers, this is really where I saw our role and how we needed to more clearly articulate that. And so we have a role to really set a vision for what the city's equity work should be, needs to look like, right? And within that, we need to make sure that we're supporting bureaus with implementation of our equity goals and strategies that are both collective and those that are bureau specific. We really should have a role and do have a role in providing professional learning opportunities for city staff. As I mentioned, our Equity 101, as well as other trainings that we're developing in collaboration with our Tribal Relations Office, as well as our Bureau of Human Resources. It is our role to apply an equity framework. Some call it a lens. I like to use the word framework to all city policies, practices, procedures, and decisions. And I've been at the table and been able to do that. We create tools and policies that provide guidance to bureaus. Some of that is specific to our work in civil rights. And then finally, and this is the piece around how do we really have more authority, right? But I think it is also our role, and we need to think about what this looks like to really monitor progress and to hold our city bureaus accountable for advancing equity. And we saw a lot of that emerging as we have been engulfed in our COVID-19 pandemic. So our mission statement, we had shared this actually, I think back in March of 2020, right before everything shut down. I was doing my budget presentation at the time, but this was a mission statement that the office had been working on for some months. And we really thought in that moment, it was important to share as we were presenting our budget back in 2020. But I will just read this very quickly so that we can hear it in the space. So the Office of Equity and Human Rights leads the City of Portland's commitment to equity. We hold the city accountable by developing policies, practices, and procedures that strive to dismantle systems of oppression and build equitable foundation for our most systemically oppressed communities. We center race and disability through education and analysis. Individuals experience multiple forms of oppression. Thus, we drive equity with an intersectional framework. And if you've had time to look at the strategic plan itself, you'll see that we really have taken some time to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say intersectionality. So I encourage you to look at that information so that you are familiar with that as we are using it and really thinking about how our work is intersectional in nature. Very quickly before I share pieces around the vision, I wanted to just share this piece with you. And I've been doing a lot of reflection and sort of thinking about how do you really articulate a vision, right? Doing that in conjunction with my teammates, right? Thinking about what that means as I look into community and see what's happening all around us, past, present, right? What our future will be. And so I ran across some research that really talked about the magic of constraints. And so the research talks about that constraints can force you to think creatively. And so sometimes when you give yourself limitations or restrictions, it pushes your mind to generate ideas that are inventive, right? And to give you sort of those solutions that you may not have thought of. And so I put a couple of examples here, right? Kind of simple, right? So if you were given the task to describe your dream bedroom, but you had some constraints, right? That the walls had to be painted white and the bedspread must contain the color blue. And maybe none of those colors, right? None of that appeals to you. But how can your creative mind, how can you push yourself beyond what is comfortable to really think about still having your dream bedroom? And so with that, I thought about what is my challenge, right? And what has been the challenge of the office. And I just offer this, right? I've been asked to serve as a director for the Office of Equity and Human Rights and also a special advisor to the mayor on issues of racial justice and equity, providing equity leadership and guidance citywide. But here are the constraints and the reality that city government, and not just our city government, but across the country, have been founded on principles and continue to uphold principles of white supremacy. And so thinking about that, right, as a constraint, in addition to, support to advance equity citywide is often impeded by individual, institutional, and systemic racism. So you talk about some constraints. And so how can we all really use the magic of constraints to push ourselves? And so in thinking about that, I share with you our vision and some statements that are related to that. And so I envision a Portland city government, we envision a Portland city government that acknowledges and is accountable to redress the harms of systemic oppression, anti-Blackness, and systems of white supremacy. So acknowledging that, being accountable to that, not just saying, yeah, that happened, no, it's happening, and what are we going to do to redress it? Using language that directly names the communities that are experiencing systemic oppression, that we're not reduced to acronyms. We've been really encouraging folks, and I was guilty of it too, using BIPOC, right? Really stepping away from that and naming our community so that they are not reduced to some letters. Creating spaces and maintaining spaces in Portland that are clean, safe, open, and free for communities so that they may enjoy all of the beautiful things that this city has to offer. And we just heard the wonderful presentations related to our beautiful outdoor space, right, in our gardens. Ensuring that Black, Indigenous, and other individuals of color enter Portland spaces every day without fear and anxiety or uncertainty about whether they'll get home and return to their families. A Portland city government that guarantees that Black, Indigenous, and other individuals of color and those with disabilities have shelter, a safe place that they can go home to return to at the end of the day. And then finally, a Portland city government that ensures Black people are not subject to, because of anti-Black racism, and I would even say implicit bias, unjustified arrest and police violence. And so that really, I think, articulates what a vision, an equity vision would look like in the city of Portland. Just very quickly, want to share some key initiatives that have come from our office. I won't go through these in any great detail. Most of you are familiar with our citywide racial equity goals and strategies. We will be facilitating a process to actually update these and think about how do we need to refine them given where we are in our current social and political context. So there's more to come on this. We know that we have our budget equity tool, which I've spoken to before, and it continues to go through revision. We have a wonderful partnership with the City Budget Office. I can't thank Director Kennard enough just for her willingness to engage with us in this process and her staff. And so we're really excited about the continued adjustment to our budget equity tool. We've had our racial equity results-based accountability training, or RBA, as some of you know it. And many bureaus have gone through cohorts. We're actually getting ready to start a third cohort here very soon. And so we're excited to bring this work to the city of Portland and think about how it informs our work and process. And then our citywide disability equity goals. So back in November of 2020, these goals were presented before council and really thinking about how we do the work better in accordance with our American Disabilities Act for city employees and also for our community. Our language access policy resolution as well came to council in November of 2020. And again, thinking about language access as a part of our Title VI and what that means, right? And it is more than just some translation, right? It goes much deeper than that. And how are we engaging with communities and thinking about multilingual communities? And then very quickly, you all have been familiar with our work in our COVID relief and recovery efforts. Our COVID relief toolkit has been used in relief efforts with the CARES funding, is currently a document, a tool that is being used as we are thinking about what's happening with our American Rescue Plan funds. And really, I think it provides some guidance and some direction for the sorts of things that we need to be thinking about as we're making decisions as it relates to our COVID relief and recovery efforts. And then very quickly, we have also been very supportive of and instrumental in citywide key equity initiatives. So our citywide City of Portland core values, and wherever I am, and making sure that I bring these to the surface in the work that we're doing. Our Juneteenth annual Day of Remembrance, and we're coming up on that this month. And so we're really excited. And both of those resolutions happened last year in the middle of what was a lot of stuff going on, but we were really excited to support that work as well. We're thinking now about how we can recognize Juneteenth for this year. So I just really want to spend the rest of my time very quickly going through our goals and sort of the plan of action. You have all of the details in the plan itself that you were provided, but I just wanted to highlight the goals themselves and give a little bit more context and list some accountability partners that you'll see there on the slide. This is not all, right? But we wanted to name some of the ones that were sort of coming top of mind. So the first goal is around embedding and aligning citywide policies, procedures, and practices to really ensure that we've got collective implementation and understanding of our equity work in the city. It's institutionalized, that we're dismantling systemic oppression in all of our policy and practice. And really what that means is establishing an anti-racist intersectional foundation within the city of Portland. So changing internal policy and practice to eliminate institutional and structural racism, and doing that within the city, and also thinking about what that means with our community. Goal number 2 is thinking about how we nurture authentic and trusting community relationships and partnerships, and supporting the co-creation of city policy with community. We often want to give community something, right? And say, here, this is what we want you to do, and you just have to sign on to it. And we really are thinking about co-creation when we are talking about this particular goal. And so in this goal, we want to inform and organize and strengthen relationships with communities who are currently and historically impacted by systemic racism and ableism by aligning our equity efforts with local communities. And then goal number 3 is around equitable and anti-racist and anti-ableist city policies. And so this goal really means providing guidance to council and bureaus on existing and or new ordinances, resolutions, and policies. What do we really need to have in place to make sure that this happens? Goal number 4 is around this front-end accountability systems for our bureaus. And here really establishing a space, right, and support for bureaus to implement racial equity and disability equity goals through policy, education, and compliance. So capturing some of our civil rights work in this, as well as in goal number 5, which is citywide priority of civil rights, education, and compliance, developing criteria for how to move the city and its bureau into alignment with the express goals, intents, and provisions of civil rights laws, our ADA Title II and our Civil Rights Title VI, specific to race, language, and disability. Goal number 7, and this is really our goal that focuses on our training, but our creating an anti-racist, anti-ableist workforce. And so building equity framework capacities through citywide education and training so that bureaus have the tools and resources that they need to think about training, to think about recruitment, retention, all of those pieces, so that we, as we said, are creating an anti-racist, anti-ableist city workforce. And that is the end of my presentation, my comments. I wanted to go in pretty quick form because I know I have some testimony from my colleagues to share and wanted to leave time for questions as well. And so with that, I will have Director Bless share some comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Kathy Bless, Chief Human Resource Officer. Thank you, Dr. Webster, for inviting me to speak, celebrate, and support this work and strategic plan. Much has been asked of you since you began your role in early 2019, and much has changed since then across our nation and within our city. The Office of Equity and Human Rights vision of a city government that acknowledges harms, respects the individual, and ensures Black, Indigenous, and other people of color who enter to do business and enter to work feel safe and supported is a vision we can co-create for employees and look forward to being stewards of this work alongside OEHR. As we come up on the anniversary of the ordinances that adopted the city core values and the addition of the Juneteenth holiday, we can honor the collaboration between OEHR and BHR that has existed since Dr. Webster's arrival. To speak directly about the key initiatives and plan of action represented in this strategic document, we see ourselves in each of these goals as a necessary, willing, and engaged partner to drive accountability for each goal. BHR is focused on reinforcing a consistent citywide culture and the core values through communication, using data to make informed decisions and report outcomes, developing policy to strategic planning and collaboration with all elected official offices, directors, bureaus, equity managers, affinity groups, and the Office of Equity and Human Rights. We will ensure alignment with OEHR as our Bureau works to create its own strategic plan for council alongside the city's African American network by the end of September. Through our evolving partnership, we will continue to learn and form a city culture that reflects the change we want to see internally, how we serve our people, and externally, how we serve our community. Again, I commend Dr. Webster for all of OEHR and all of OEHR for the outstanding work this moment in history has for each of us and to witness today. Leveraging this moment is integral to systemic evolution versus rhetoric or demonstrations of the status quo. The OEHR strategic plan is bold and intentional, and it is my honor to be a partner in the work of today, which will create a better tomorrow. So thank you, Dr. Webster, and I will turn it over to Andrea Durbin, Director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability.
Thank you, Director Blass. Good morning. For the record, I'm Andrea Durbin, Director for Planning and Sustainability, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning to express our support for the work that OEHR does and their new strategic plan. OEHR plays a critical role in the city, helping to ensure that we are consistently prioritizing racial equity and disability needs in the work we do internally and externally. Over the past year, OEHR has helped the city make significant progress in prioritizing racial equity through the creation of the Equity Toolkit. The Equity Toolkit helped bureaus and City Council prioritize racial equity needs in the allocation of CARES Act funding last year. BPS also worked closely with OEHR in developing the COVID-19 recovery resolution that Council passed last year, which makes it clear that as we recover from COVID and the economic crisis, we must build back better by prioritizing racial justice and the climate crisis at the same time. That resolution provides important direction for our recovery work ahead. BPS works closely with OEHR across our program work, and to give you a flavor for the role and impact OEHR has across the city, I thought I'd share a couple of examples of some of the work that we do together. The BPS Smart City PDX program collaborates directly with the Office of Equity and Human Rights on all of our work related to privacy and surveillance, including developing the world-leading policies limiting the use of facial recognition technologies, as well as the current work and community engagement related to the development of comprehensive surveillance policies for Portland. We also have benefited from OEHR's assistance to community outreach for older adults and people with disabilities for our age-friendly program, as well as making sure we're meeting accessibility and language access needs in our community engagement work. And OEHR is a key partner in the anti-displacement action plan work that BPS is leading. Specifically, OEHR is helping us develop a cross-bureau accountability framework that identifies citywide and community-specific indicators, or better off measures, that bureaus will be collectively trying to achieve through our work. Finally, I'd like to commend Dr. Webster for her leadership and the clarity she brings to her role and influence in the city. She's a real asset for the city and for all of Portland. Thank you, Dr. Webster, for your leadership, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to join today.
Thank you both, Andrea and Kathy. I'll use your first names for sharing and supporting today. So I think we will open up for questions.
Very good, colleagues. Questions on the report? Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Webster, and your able assistant, Kofi, who I know does a lot of the heavy lifting in your office. This is a really inspiring strategic plan. And I just want to say, Dr. Webster, it has made a difference. I think the last few years have really made a difference in the clarity of the work of the Office of Equity and Human Rights. The fact that we were able to actually give the office teeth to be able to hold bureaus accountable, whether it's through the budget process or whether it's through the priorities that we set. Without your office, I'm not sure we would have made the kind of decisions we made around the CARES Act dollars or the intentionality that we are creating in bureaus and expectations around outcomes. And so I want to applaud the clarity of the work that you've been involved in. And it's taken a while to actually get to a place where I think we can all have more confidence about where we're headed. Right? I think the anxiety of not knowing, the anxiety of being in a city that's uncomfortable with conversations around race and equality it puts you in a very hard spot. And I agree with Director Durbin, who said the clarity that you bring in every room that you're in actually allows for us to have the real conversations. For me, it's always frustrating when we talk around the edges and we talk like we are focused on the real issues. And I think your office has given us so much clarity around how we measure what we say, because for decades, the city of Portland has said all the right things, but the outcomes do not reflect the things that we say. I think the strategic plan is a way for us to really focus consistently on whether or not we are who we think we are. I guess my only question about, and I didn't get a chance to read the report in real detail, but I guess I would like to have more clarity about like what happens in year one, what happens in year two, and what are we measuring in year one to see if we're on track. And I didn't see that through my first glance through. And I don't want to wait until 2024 or 5 to find out that we failed miserably in our effort. So if you could give me some understanding about where's the measurements and what are we actually measuring each year, that would be helpful.
Thank you for the questions and comments, Commissioner Hardesty. I always appreciate your support. So in the document, there are some timelines, right? So there are some specific action steps, right, connected to a timeline. And so, there's some refinement, right, that we need to sort of think about in terms of what that looks like. To your question around the measurements, one of the really exciting things that I'm so, just thankful to Council, we did get seven positions, right, to help us build some capacity. And one of those positions is a data analyst. And so for the first time, we're going to have someone really have the expertise to have us think through what are those measures and how do we collect that, right? We also have an equity strategist position that will have some responsibility for that as well. And so I think what you see is very generalized. It's sort of very high level, but as we get into the work and really see what it is that we can collect and what that needs to look like, because we've been reliant on what is available to us. But now we have the opportunity to really expand and to think outside of the box, that you'll begin to see that be refined, right? And we can come back and report on that in a way that will show you the progress that we've been making. And so that's why I said in the beginning, this is a dynamic document. And so we know that there are some places and spaces that we really have to dig a little deeper. And we have the capacity now for the first time to do that. So hopefully that answers Commissioner Hardesty, the direction that we're going.
Yeah, that is very helpful. And so maybe, you know, after your staff is fully onboarded and you have a chance to think about it, because for me, I mean, I can't hold my bureau directors accountable for equitable outcomes if in fact we don't know what those measurements are, right? And so I think it's important that we know each year how close we are to achieving our goals in this report. I just think that's gonna be key. And so I look forward to whatever my office can do to assist you as you're thinking through what are those year one outcomes, what are those year two outcomes, and how do we build better. We're there to do whatever we can do to help. It's a fine document, a real visionary statement about who we want to be. But what I know is the city's always wanted to be better than we really are. And the data shows us today that we're nowhere close to being who we want to be. So I look forward to the day where we're looking at data that shows that we're making radical transformations in these outcomes. So thank you. And Dr. Webster, you are the person, your team are the right team to hold us to that vision. Thank you.
Commissioner Mapps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Dr. Webster, for this report and all of your hard work on the strategic plan. I think my question very much echoes some of the thoughts put forward by Commissioner Hardesty. Although I'm excited about this report, I'd like to have a clearer sense of how the city is going to be different in, say, 3 years, 5 years by virtue of following the strategic plan. And it would also be helpful to me as a commissioner if I knew what metrics I should be looking at in order to evaluate our progress. And it sounds like we're working on those, but those are some of the tools I need in order to be better oriented in this space. And if you want to respond to that, that's great. If you just want to receive it, that's fine too.
I'll receive it, but yes, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Dr. Webster, and your team for all the thoughtful work into this that you put into this presentation and into the strategic plan development. My question is about the regional implication of your plan, working within the city. I'm sure there is discussion with your counterparts in other jurisdictions. I'm just curious about what is that conversation, and is there alignment around a lot of the work that you're doing, and what is the vision of your group together for the region?
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio, for the question. And it is a good question. I do meet regularly, once a month actually, with our partners in Metro, our counterpart in Metro, Rocky Reddy, and Ben Duncan over at the county. And so in just full transparency, a lot of our conversation over the last year has just been like, how are you surviving, right? In the midst of everything that is happening, and thinking about how your role is shifting and changing, given our social and political context right now. They have been aware of the work that we've been doing. I've shared our goals and sort of, the thinking, right, where we were headed, the direction we were headed. I would say, we often are looked to as a leader, I think, in the region around work in equity. And so my colleagues are, often asking for the resources and kind of the direction and some guidance about what their next steps are, depending on what it may be. And so I think, now that we have this sort of in a form that is complete, right, and sort of ready to think about implementation, I really want them to be a partner in this. And I think that, we need to find the intersections where that happens. And so I'm excited. I said we talk regularly, and I know that this will, be a part of our process of implementation moving forward. But, I also am honored, right, that they often are looking at our office as a leader in the work that happens across the region. And so that's more pressure to really make sure that we're being very thoughtful and intentional about what we do. So hopefully that gives you some context, Commissioner Rubio, about where we've been as a regional group.
Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Webster. It's always good to have you at council meetings. A lot of my thoughts were already been dialogue that's taken place, but I want to stick with it just a little bit. I'll never forget when I went to a conference about 8 years ago now, and the speaker said something really profound, and it was also an opportunity to experience that tension in the room. And it was tension that was felt by, I think, a lot of different people for different reasons. But they basically said, if you're not measuring equity work, then you're not really doing equity work. And then it became a really intense dialogue about what that measurement is. And I'm okay with the conflict and the tension around getting to what those metrics are, but I really did believe that speaker, who is an African-American scholar, and it was just helpful in the work that I've always led to make sure that you get to the bottom of it. And so that you can really see and know what the baseline disparities are, and then see, and I like that you mentioned policy, practice, and procedures, because it's at the practice and procedure level where the behavior change must take place to move the needle. Policies are the weakest of those three links, in my opinion. And so culture change doesn't happen until you see that vertical alignment and connecting those dots. So in your report, which I have to reread and go deeper, I want to try to see those themes. And our office would be helpful in continuous improvement thinking as it relates to operationalizing equity. So those were my comments. I do have one question, and it is Pride Month. And the LGBTQI community often feels left out at times in these conversations. And I can tell you my lived experience and others in the community is that the evils and the ills and the bad behaviors come from every race that you can think of. And so it's very deeply complicated and helpful to amplify that. So will I find it if I dig deeper into the report on how the LGBTQI community is seen in this report?
Thank you for the comment and for the question, Commissioner Ryan. So yes, and I want to also add that we have a new LGBTQIA policy analyst that is in our office. That was one of those 7 positions that I was talking about that really will be charged with having conversations and doing some research and thinking about where are the gaps, right, in our understanding and our policy, and helping us to move that work forward as an office. And so I'm really, not that it's their sole responsibility, but I am excited to have the expertise in our office to help us do that. So yes.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate that you said to move away from acronyms, and then I just gave you that really long acronym. And so the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans questioning community really does appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Webster. Just a few quick questions. So I'm also curious about some of the external efforts. Would you envision the office creating and managing feedback specifically from community members, and what's the out-year plan to do that?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that's a good question. I think it's a question that we have to think about in collaboration with our Office of Community and Civic Life, who is primarily charged with outward facing, right? And so how can we do that in collaboration? You'll see that they are named as a partner on a lot of our goals, but specific to community. We get some of that now, Mayor, and just in full transparency. And often, if we can't address it, we're thinking about what resource we can send individuals or community members to in the city so that they can have their questions or their comments received. And so I think that is a good challenge for us to think about how we are in relationship with our Office of Community and Civic Life. And one I'm very interested in, have been.
And I look forward to continuing to work with you on that. I think that's a step in the right direction for sure. Getting back to this question of how we measure success, that's something that my colleagues all indicated. From my perspective, the question is really, how do we measure the health of the community on the ground? And as you know, being part of our team, our office refers to various research reports. There's the Coalition of Communities of Color Unsettling Profiles report. There's the PALF Now Imagine Blacks Peoples Plan. There's the Urban League of Oregon's State of Black Oregon report. There's Reimagine Oregon's policy demands and many others. Is there some way we can use the data that you gather, whether it's Bureau data, whether it's census data, combine it with those efforts that are already underway, that are already well supported and providing good feedback? Is there some way that the office could capture this type of information from community members and organizations that might help us get a better overall sense of the health of the community?
Absolutely, Mayor. Thank you for the question. And I know that in thinking about, in particular, the People's Plan, right, most of these have been very influential in the work of the office. And Dr. Dessou can also support this statement that they have been instrumental in thinking about how we do our work and how we, at one point, I was like, we've got all these plans, right? I need somebody to sort of create a matrix, right? So we can see the areas where, goals align. And then what does that mean for the work that we do in our office? And so, yes, I think that is something that can happen. And we have relationships with a lot of these folks. And so I think it's just a matter of, particularly around our community goal, thinking about, how do we facilitate those conversations? Like, hey, we've got this plan, right? We're ready to really think about the next phases in this, and how can you and the work that you're doing specific in community help inform what that looks like? And I think it will also go a long way in continuing to build our relationship with community, or rebuild that, right, in places where maybe there has been, been a gap. And so, yes, simple answer, yes.
Awesome. And one final question, and I appreciate these answers, by the way. This is a good conversation. With regard to Goal 7, what kind of demographics will the Office of Equity and Human Rights be reporting back to the council? I assume race and ethnicity would be an important demographic. I'm wondering about gender or sexual orientation or bureau affiliation. What sort of demographic information do you think is most important for the council to have that you could be measuring and reporting back?
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. I think all of what you've named, right, for sure. I'm also really interested, because of the work that we do in disability equity, what we collect there, right? Don't have any specifics that are coming to mind. Much of what we're talking about is very sensitive to begin with when we think about data collection, which is why RBA is such an important part. Our results-based accountability framework is such an important part of how we do our work. My visitor, I almost got through it, you all. Hold on. So our RBA framework is very informative in thinking about how we collect information. I'm interested too, just in what's happening with, I think, youth. There's some pieces there, and that for me is kind of, as a former educator, but I think that also kind of gets to this question about the health of our community, what's happening with our youth, thinking about the gun violence that we're seeing happen, and the demographics, right, that we're capturing related to that. And so I think, yes, all that you named, I'm excited, like I said, that we'll have a data analyst coming on board in July. That's going to also help us think about what are maybe some of the demographics that we're not thinking about that we could be collecting, and how do we go about doing that in a culturally responsive way? And so I think the possibilities are really endless. Anything, obviously, as it relates to retention and recruitment, right? All of that work that's done in partnership with Bureau of Human Resources is really important. So we've got a lot, right? I think it's just one, building the system and sort of pulling all the pieces together. I'm excited, to really sort of expand that. And our work with Laura John in our Tribal Relations Office, and what this work looks like for our Native communities.
Yeah, that's good, and I'd obviously encourage us to collect that demographic data because that's what's going to help us identify any potential trends. So we have to be strategic about which data we decide to collect, and then we have to consistently collect it over time so that we're actually seeing what the trends are. You know, for the way I think, I can't really tell whether we're being successful or not based on a snapshot in time. While that's useful, without the trend analysis, without seeing what's happening over time, it's really hard for me to tell whether we're making progress or not. So that's my pitch for that.
Yeah. And much of that, Mayor, much of what I shared, you know, that work that Director Durbin talked about, those are the sorts of demographics that we're collecting in our collaboration with our Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So we have a kind of a blueprint for what that could look like.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Your questions brought another question to me, and I'm sitting here chuckling a little bit because Dr. Webster, you may have 7 new FTE, but what you've just committed to is going to require 17 new FTE. And I would highly recommend that we not think that you're going to do all things for all people in this position with your new staff. And I think we owe you the opportunity to meet with your new staff and do your strategic planning internally so that you are more intentional when you step out into the world. There's so much work that we have to do internal to the city that is a full-time job and then some. And so I want to lower expectations because if we do a little well, we will be able to have a huge impact on how we invest our dollars, how we support our employees. You know, when we find out 43% of Black employees have left in the last 3 years, I mean, we got a lot of internal work that we need to do to find out how we interrupt that. So, Mayor, there are a lot of pieces out there. There's all this work that's been done historically that really points out the inequities that have existed forever in our institutions. And so, Dr. Webster, I just want to caution you to not think that your office with your new 7 people are going to be able to resolve hundreds of years of institutional white supremacy, right? I look forward to you coming back in about 6 months and telling us kind of what the roadmap is and what you can and what you cannot do, but how you can connect some of the work that's happening, because there are a lot of tables that are doing a lot of stuff. And it would be a full-time job to just coordinate that stuff. And so I'm just putting a note of caution. We're all excited about a strategic plan and the more staff, but I also want us to take the time to do it right and not to over-promise a community that we're going to be able to do it all. It is my only caution.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Hardesty. And just as a funny thing, I think Kofi was like, we can't really do that. But I at one point said, if we have one sheet of paper that has like 1 or 2 goals on it at this point, I'd be really happy. Like I'd gone to a very dark place at one point. Yeah. Well, he was like, we can't really do that. So here we are.
I was actually looking at Kofi's face as you were committing your office to everything. And so I just wanted to bring us back to, you know, some semblance of you've earned the right for you to decide within your office how you can help move all this work forward. And I look forward to 6 months later, you telling us what that looks like.
Very, very good. I'll call on Kofi, and then maybe Commissioner Hardesty after Kofi, I'll call on you to move the report. Kofi.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Commissioner Hardesty, you read my face so well. I don't know. I was excited at the same time in experiencing some anxiety. The reality is, you know, the person we just hired to really tackle the COVID-19, equity toolkit, relief equity toolkit, and really help the bureaus implement the result-based accountability framework. Is a limited term position, and I'll be like, okay, we're just starting and we are thinking about the expiration of that position. So thank you for reading my mind. But we are grateful for the City Council for giving us more resources, especially the data, analysts, not just the Office of Equity and Human Rights, but data analysts across other bureaus, to join the equity teams in other city bureaus. So we are grateful for that. And, like you said, we need more ongoing positions to really do this culture change work, but also starting to measure our progress. We have been making some progress that we have not measured yet, so that we can tell the community that, okay, this is what we have really done. And it is important. So thank you so much.
Colleagues, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the report as submitted.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Ryan. Keelan, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Yes, thanks again for the being here this morning. It's always wonderful to have you at council meetings, and I love the dialogue we were just having. And I think most of my comments came out during my comment question moment. I just want to once again, though, say how refreshing it was here to see how you see the community as part of the inside job, meaning from the inside out. So making sure that we have the voices at the front end and the foundation building is something I'm really proud to hear from your report. Thank you. And I think that committing to that will take a little bit longer, and it'll be worth it when it comes to the results. So I just want to acknowledge that there are times where it must feel like the anxiety could go up. Kofi, thank you for being so honest, as it looks like we're trying to get you to boil the ocean. I'd rather have you go deep in a few areas than to spray and pray all over the place. So, so keep up the good work. Thank you.
Did you vote?
Oh, I forgot to vote. Sorry. Aye. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. You always catch me.
I'm just trying to be helpful. Again, I've seen the evolution of the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And I think the office has hit its stride. It understands its role. It now has the power to actually hold bureaus accountable. It's building the internal partnerships that will be necessary to actually realize where we say we want to go. I am so proud of the team that's been assembled in the Office of Equity and Human Rights. I know many of the folks in that office. I've had a long time relationships with them. Dr. Webster is my newest friend there. But what I know is that office, every single staff person is committed to this work. And you were committed to the work before you had additional resources. You were committed to the work before you had the institutional power to make change happen. And you were committed to the work before last summer, when Black lives started to matter in the city of Portland. And so I just want to acknowledge the incredible work that you've done with very limited resources, with very little recognition over the years, and acknowledge the incredible team that you've built, the incredible commitment of each and every one of your employees within your bureau, and the really hard journey that you've been on, and that you continue to be on in spite of the obstacles, in spite of the institutional barriers that prevent you from immediate success. And I want you to know, I understand that this is a journey that we are on. We are not going to reach equity in 2022 or 2024. But if we're not measuring where we're headed, we will continue to get the same outcomes that we get. And so I look forward to our continued partnership and continuing to work with you and my bureaus to make sure that we, in fact, are doing what we say we're going to do. So I'm very happy to vote aye and look forward to the future of this work.
Maps.
I'd like to thank Dr. Webster and her team for their work on this important report. I vote aye.
Rubio.
Thank you again, Dr. Webster and Dr. Dasu, for developing this strategic plan and the presentation and for the great discussion. I also want to really acknowledge the staff who have helped lead our city's COVID response through tours and the Emergency Coordination Center and the Joint Volunteer Information Center. I know it's been a lot, and we really want to show our appreciation and thank you for that. For this plan to be successful and for the office to help navigate true transformation, it's really going to take all of our leadership and deliberate work that takes time. And I just want to remind us all that setting up systems and then implementing the plan are two different kinds of work. And that requires intentional focus work on each of those things. And it seems that we are in the place of, we need to set up the system so that we can do the work in that place. So I just want to make sure that we're recognizing that as well. It's too important to the future work of the city and our employees, and our community has been waiting a long time. So we will get it right. As council members, we also need to show that this work is a priority through support and through action, and we must hold ourselves accountable as well as our bureaus. And I know my team and I are committed and will continue to stay engaged as this plan gets more fully scoped out and defined. And I also want to suggest that I think that all my colleagues and I would greatly benefit from having regular updates about the progress of the plan and how we can be helpful and support this important work moving forward. So congratulations, and I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Webster and the Office of Equity and Human Rights team, the network of bureau-based equity managers, our many community partners who provided invaluable direction and insight, and who I hope will continue to partner with the city on these efforts going forward, and former City Commissioner Amanda Fritz and her staff who assisted in the development of this report, particularly Cynthia Castro. I want to thank them as well. This kind of work, changing the culture of public institutions, as we've all acknowledged in one way or the other today, it is both difficult as well as delicate work. We're fortunate to have such an all-star team at the office, and I just want to thank you for the continued effort. I am very happy to vote aye, and the report is accepted. Thank you all. Keelan, next item, we're on our last time a certain item before we move to the regular agenda. Item number 406, please.
Proclaim May 30, 2021 to be Vanport Day of Remembrance.
Colleagues, today we pause to reflect on an environmental, racial, and social injustice that occurred only 8 miles away from Portland City Hall on Memorial Day in 1948. We read the Vanport Proclamation as part of today's City Council agenda so that we may help to build a shared understanding of the history of our city. And we may use this understanding to do better, to do right by every human being, to build back our city more resilient, more prosperous, and more inclusive. Before we hear from our special guests, I want to recognize a particular Vanport survivor who is a pillar of the Native American community here in the Portland area. Today, let us remember and honor Mrs. Joyce Nelson. Earlier this year, our community lost a visionary leader. As a child, her parents relocated from Fort Peck Reservation in Montana to Portland. She went on to graduate from Lincoln High School and the Haskell Institute. She was committed to ensuring that all Native families had opportunities for a better life, particularly those who are new to our city. Mrs. Nelson taught us how to lead in meaningful ways to help one another. Joyce's philosophy was well known to those who had the privilege to learn from her. If everybody helped everybody, it would be a much better world. That encapsulates her philosophy. and she was so right. To help carry on this legacy and to honor those who lost and the survivors of Vanport, we have two community leaders who are also creating a much better world. Mr. Edward J. Washington and Laura Laforte. And with that, I'll turn to Laura and Mr. Edward Washington. Welcome.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And thank you so much, Mayor Wheeler, for honoring Miss Joyce Nelson. African writer Amadou Hampâté-Bâ wrote, "When an elder dies, a library burns to the ground." And that is why it's so important to create space and time to receive and acknowledge the gifts of our elder stories. My name is Laura Laforte, and I am the co-founder of the Vanport Mosaic. We are a platform for memory activism. We believe that remembering is an act of resistance, and we amplify, honor, present, and preserve the many silenced histories of our region. This special moment today is part of the 6th Vanport Mosaic Festival that we run until June 30th with virtual and in-person events to remember, reclaim, repair, and reimagine our collective story. The city of Portland is a supporter of this incredible collective effort. So I take this opportunity to thank you all for believing in what we are doing as an incredible network of community partners and representatives from so many communities. And I also want to take the opportunity to remember Commissioner Nick Fish, who truly believed in the importance of this story and this collective effort. And he was so genuinely passionate about the Vanport story. And he even awarded us the Spirit of Portland award. As a story midwife, that's what I call myself, I had the honor to listen to and to record the memories of Vanport former residents and survivors since 2016 or 15 actually. And I've consistently and continuously been inspired by their lessons of strength and resiliency, their sense of community, and the dedication to the city. And so I'm just grateful to them and to their families for keeping this history alive, and to you, Mayor Wheeler, and city commissioners for taking the time to remember the tragedy that occurred on Memorial Day in 1948, but also to celebrate the different communities that call Vanport home and their incredible contribution to the city. And I'm excited to share with you all that we are in the process of completing a permanent tribute to the Vanport community and to the spirit of Vanport in the new Vanport building. So there's going to be more opportunities to gather with you, hopefully in person, to remember and celebrate this history. And talking about the spirit of Vanport, I cannot imagine someone who encapsulates these lessons and these contributions more than Mr. Ed Washington. Mr. Ed Washington was a child in Vanport and survived the flood in 1948. And he went on throughout his life to contribute, to change, to inspire, to fight for the city to be what it's supposed to be, a city that is inclusive, is just, and is a place of belonging for all of us, including myself, who I come obviously for really far away. So it is a great honor to introduce Mr. Ed Washington. I'm not sure that anyone here needs we all know Mr. Washington. He's Oregon's treasure. And so I'd love for him to actually honor the story and share some memories and why this story continues to be so important still today.
Mr. Washington, you're muted.
Is that better?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Much better. You taking lessons from the mayor, huh?
Yes. Well, no, my son.
Don't listen to her.
My son just fitted me with the headset, so this is new. So at any rate, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Mapes, Hardesty, Rubio, and Ryan, thank you very much for the proclamation. Thank you very much for remembering the city of Vanport. And I'm going to just reflect a little bit on Vanport, my experience there. You know, it really seems just like yesterday that the flood occurred. And that was 73 years ago yesterday. And I will hope that 73 years from this year, that the city council will be recognizing Vanport. And I'm sure some people will say, why would we even think about that 73 years out in the future? Vanport was a very, very special place, and it was a very special place, and it played a very special role in this city. The 1940 census for the entire state of Oregon listed less than 2,500 African Americans in the entire state. And I can, time doesn't permit it, but I can just about name where those people were located. The majority were in Portland. But when the war started and there was just no homes, and of course there was redlining in the city of Portland, so African Americans that were coming here by the train loads as a result of the Kaiser shipyards, they didn't have the option to live wherever they wanted to in this city. And unfortunately, the Housing Authority of Portland, who really had the responsibility for building Vanport, and you all know this, they segregated Vanport. They segregated it. By the time my family arrived in 1944, people were coming into Vanport so fast that the Housing Authority had a little bit of difficulty in keeping people separated. Another interesting thing about the Housing Authority, and this is not a Get on the Housing Authority Day, I don't want you to think that, but they also instructed the superintendent of schools, who was a gentleman, Dr. James Hamilton, who had been a professor of education at Reed College. They also told him to segregate the schools. And thank goodness, he was a person of goodwill. And he said, no way, it's not going to happen, not in 100 million years. He said, I want these kids who are coming from all over the country and residing in Vanport. And Vanport was pretty much the same. All the units were the same color. And he says, I want these kids to have an educational opportunity that is not the same as the sameness of the units that they all live in. And that wasn't a criticism of how we live. That's how the units were. And so the school system in Vanport, I owe all of my education to the education that I got in Vanport. Vanport had K through 8. There were 3 schools. They had 24-hour daycare. It had 24-hour nurseries, had shopping centers. It had about 6 to 8 recreation centers, had several fields where kids could play ball or do whatever else they wanted to do. And so, you know, I think they really tried to do the best they could under the circumstances to make Vanport a livable place. And for me, it was very livable. I owe just about everything to that experience. And I never had any idea. I think in the day of the flood, I think the thing that concerned me the most was that I wondered, once my family was safe, I just wondered about all of my friends and if I would ever see any of them again. And everywhere we would go on that evening after the flood, my family spent an evening in Ockley Green Grade School, and then was advised that Monday morning that there was a church on Northeast Rodney and Russell that would take some Black families. And that sort of tells you just the place we were in this city, that people had to be identified as to where you could go and be safe. And I just hope that we have come a long ways from that, but I know we still have lots of work to do. So I just want to say that never forget Vanport. It had a spirit that was just, the flood could not destroy the spirit of Vanport. And it is a place that I hope, and I have a sense that if we do this every year, that 73 years from now, we'll be still celebrating really not the bad parts of Vanport, but really the wonderful thing that made Vanport what it was. And not only was it was the second largest city in the state of Oregon population-wise. And I can't tell you, I just got a call yesterday from a man in Eugene that had read something about me somewhere, and he had a question about Vanport and about the kids that used to go to the farms to pick beans, and he named names, and I said, well, I know the bus driver. And so that's the spirit of Vanport. It just never disappears. So I think I've said all I need to say today, other than thank you again for never forgetting the city that would never die. And in closing, I would just like to say, I don't know if any of you know George Nakata. Mr. Nakata, I don't know if you know, he passed away about a week ago. And he and I had the opportunities to do the Vanport tours with the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. And Valerie Otani, who's a Japanese person, they talked about the internment. And so she passed away about a year or so ago. So I hope that you will keep them both in your thoughts and in your prayers. And thank you so very, very much for allowing me to share this time with you, even if I couldn't unmute at first. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Washington. And you're not the first person today to have troubles unmuting, as Commissioner Hardesty duly noted. Thank you for being here today. We so appreciate it. And thank you, Ms. Laforte, for your comments as well. We feel so privileged to have you both here and be part of this. I do have a proclamation I'd like to read, but before that, I want to defer to my colleagues. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. These long days, we must keep our sense of humor. Otherwise, we would be pulling our hair out. Thank you both, Laura Forte and Ed Washington, for your for being here today. I have to say, Ed, you know, you reminded me that every year when we talk about Vanport, from the flood. But we don't talk about Vanport from the community that was built. That was like this unique oasis in a sea of anti-Black, anti-Asian laws, right? And standards that were in place at the time. And thank you for reminding me today about the real live example. And I've seen you twice or three times at that tour. George was at the last one. And I'm so sorry to hear about his death. But what you reminded me was Vanport was an anomaly in a sea of white supremacy. It was a place where people lived together, they worked together, they played together, and it didn't matter where they came from, what their skin color was, what faith they practiced. People came there because there was opportunity. They could get a job. They could actually feed their families, right? Mm-hmm. Man, am I glad that you remind us that Vanport was it was an anomaly in the United States, not just in Oregon. It was an anomaly in the United States during that time. I mean, we had the KKK in charge of our government, right? You know, that's who we were then. And Vanport, in spite of who we were all around the country, was a place that rejected all the norms and said, look, we gotta figure out how to live together, how to work together, how to worship together, how to get educated together. So thank you. Because you changed everything I was going to say today just with the little bit of remembrance that you provided. And I think that you honor us today, and you honor the legacy of Vanport by reminding us of the joy and the community that was Vanport. So thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Hardesty, thank you for your very kind words and for helping fill that in. You know, when you get up to talk about Vanport, I could say so many things, and there's so much to say, and I always forget something. So thank you. And like, I didn't forget this, but Portland State University was just as important a part of Vanport as anybody. It started in Vanport City, Oregon, as the Vanport Extension Center. But the people in Vanport called it Vanport College. It was only a 2-year college, but the people were proud of it. And they said, we've got a college in our city now.
Right.
So there's a whole lot of stuff about Vanport that's just, I would be here all day if you would allow me, because I could tell you about it all, but I do the best I can with the time.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, and thanks to everyone for those powerful presentations today. I just want to say it's an honor to join with you in declaring May 30th, 2021 to be Vanport Day of Remembrance. I think it's important that we remember Vanport because the tale of our sister city continues to teach us lessons. For those of you who don't know the Vanport story, in the 1940s, Vanport was the second largest city in Oregon. And in 1948, Vanport was wiped out by a flood of biblical proportions. Today, Delta Park and Portland International Raceway occupy the land where Vanport once stood. And as we have heard, Vanport was a remarkable city. The name Vanport is, of course, a mashup between the words Vanport or Vancouver and Portland. Vanport was founded in the 1940s to house workers at the wartime Kaiser shipyards. In the 1940s, about 40,000 people lived in that city, and a poll from that decade asked families why they moved to Vanport. And the top reason was they thought it was their duty to go into defense work. And as we've also heard, it's important to remember that about 40% of the residents of Vanport were Black. And here's how this happened. The wartime defense industry jobs in Vanport triggered a great migration of African Americans into Oregon. I think in terms of African Americans, it's entirely possible that Vanport was the most racially integrated city Oregon has ever seen. Now, all of that came to an end at 4:05 p.m., May 30th, 1948. That's when a 200-foot-long section of a railroad berm holding back the Columbia River collapsed, triggering a flood. By nightfall, Vanport was underwater, and about 17,500 Vanportlanders were homeless. That flood drove many African Americans who lived in Vanport to Portland. And I tend to think of this flood of Black refugees into Portland as the beginning of the modern era of Black politics here in the city of Roses. 1948, in other words, was the moment when Portland not only began to grapple with the culture change needed to recognize Black people, not only as full citizens of the state of Oregon. The flood of 1948 was also the moment when white Portlanders began to grapple with the cultural change that is needed to accept Black Portlanders as neighbors. Now, 73 years after the Vanport flood, this council continues to struggle with the work of changing our culture so that we have a more equitable and inclusive city. And I know, especially after this long year of COVID, many of us are exhausted. But I also want to remind Portlanders that the arc of the mortal universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And that's why I want to take this moment to thank every Portlander who's made a personal commitment to be kind to their neighbors, regardless of the color of their skin. Your human decency is bending the moral arc of the universe towards justice. And that's why I'm so grateful to spend this moment with you, reflecting on Vanport. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you so much for the presentation, Laura Laforte and Mr. Washington. There's that old saying that we all know, which gets repeated all the time, about those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And I have this in mind when we acknowledge the history of Vanport and its residents in shaping our culture today and its considerable economic contribution to our region today. And there's this collective deep sense of loss when we think about what the city and what it would be like today had the flood not happened, or more importantly, if city leaders at the time had rightly valued this community for its contribution and prioritized the community's recovery and rebuilding. Even in the midst of all of the racism that residents experienced at this time, Vanport had so many characteristics that we heard today about that we all want to see in all of our communities, you know, a vibrant, engaged, and diverse community, a community where working families could make a healthy life and where our communities took care of one another. And these qualities have always been regarded as being very desirable qualities of cities. And yet when they're found in Black and Brown communities, the rules have been different. And they're been treated and seen as a threat or subjugated to economic and even physical violence in some cases. And just last week, we honored the memory of Tulsa's Black Wall Street. And nearly all of us drew lessons in connection to Portland and what it means for us. And so today we need to honor Vanport by remembering all that it contributed and on the social strong fabric created by numerous Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and other communities, and as well as the hard lessons of leadership failures and its lasting effects on all of us. So we need to learn from this history in order to be the kind of city that we truly want to be. And I'm so grateful for this proclamation and for keeping this important history alive. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Washington for all his own vast contributions to our city and our community as well. We're so fortunate to have your leadership in our community, and I could listen to you talk all day. So thank you so much for honoring us with this important history today.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me, Laura Laforte. It was so good to hear your presentation, and thanks for what I saw you put in the chat about the exhibit up at Pittock Mansion about Vanport. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. So I wanted to make sure people knew that you wrote that in the chat. Mr. Washington, it's good to see you. I have heard you speak almost all day about this because we go back to Portland State when we had the Vanport Classic, that you were the leader that brought that to the campus and to the community. And when we were experiencing the Vanport Classic, when we had Grambling State and North Carolina A&T come to Portland, you were able to tell the story of PSU's beginning at the extension at Vanport. And you also brought Commissioner Nick Fish into the presentation. And so I wasn't surprised when Laura brought her up. So basically, everything I was going to say was mentioned by the two of you because of that experience. And this is our fourth dialogue this morning about important proclamations. And I just want to say it's so awesome that the two of you are here to tell the main story about Vanport. As a lifelong Portlander, with someone who had roots within my own friendship circle of people that lived at Vanport, because it was working class whites that were there with African Americans working in the shipyards. It's a very deep story that most Portlanders don't understand. So thank you so much, Mr. Washington, once again, for living to tell the story and telling it so well. And then thank you, Laura, for letting me know that there's actually an exhibit. And now I must check it out to see if it also tells the story of Vanport. And I hope Mr. Washington has checked it out as well, and he can give us a critique on if it nailed it or not. So anyway, I worry with so many people from the Vanport years moving on into their transition that we really do take time to make sure that that history is solid and it's told with the truth that it deserves, because that's what heals us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. So with that, colleagues, on behalf of the Portland City Council, I will read a proclamation. Whereas our understanding of history shapes our view of the present, and to understand where we're going, we must understand where we are from. And whereas 2021 is the 79th anniversary of the construction of Vanport, built in 1942. And whereas Vanport was once the country's largest public housing project and Oregon's second largest city with a peak population of 42,500 people. And whereas Vanport was intended as temporary housing for the war workers pouring into Portland from all over the country, supplying labor to 3 major shipbuilding yards. And whereas Vanport was demographically diverse with African American, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, and white populations who all came from elsewhere to work in the shipyards. Whereas a post-war housing shortage affected all incoming laborers, but due to Portland's discriminatory housing policies of the time, such as redlining, many of the African American workers could find no place to live because they were restricted to a small area of Portland that was already at full capacity. And whereas after the war, the city was also home to many Japanese Americans who returned from prison camps to find Vanport the only place they could procure housing in the Portland area. And whereas these groups of people found themselves all strangers together and forged new connections that endured even after Vanport was gone. And whereas Vanport was constructed in the Columbia River floodplain and was protected from the river by a series of levees. And whereas the Columbia River flooded on May 30th, 1948, displacing 18,700 residents, about 6,300 of them African American, leaving them homeless and without most of their belongings. Whereas at least 15 people died in the Vanport flood. 2 were Japanese American, who were among many who had few living options when released from concentration camps during World War II. And whereas Vanport Mosaic will hold the 6th Vanport Mosaic Festival from May 26th to June 30th to honor and celebrate Vanport as an essential and often forgotten chapter in Portland's history, a story that provides a template for how we can all live together and create a society that honors history, cultural contributions, and paves the way for our humanity and our city to thrive. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim May 30th, 2021 to be Vanport Day of Remembrance in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this day. Thank you. We will now move to the regular agenda. First item on the regular agenda, Proclamation 415. Please.
Proclaim June 2021 to be Portland Opera and Oregon Ballet Theater Live Performance Month.
Colleagues, I'd like to introduce our guest speakers, Kevin Irving, who is the Artistic Director at the Oregon Ballet Theater, and Sue Dixon, who's the General Director of the Portland Opera. Good morning. Afternoon, actually. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and esteemed councilors. It is an honor to speak in front of this body today in connection to the proclamation before you. As the mayor said, my name is Kevin Irving, and I am the Artistic Director of Oregon Ballet Theater, a post I have held for the last 8 years. Briefly, I came to Portland and OBT after many years of a professional life in dance, first as a dancer with Alvin Ailey in New York City, and then with Les Grands Ballets Canadiens in Montreal, later as assistant to world-renowned Spanish choreographer Nacho Duato in Madrid, and subsequently directing the Gothenburg Opera Ballet in Sweden. Arriving in Portland after traveling the globe as I did, I immediately felt that I had found the home I had been searching for, which is why the artistic and long-term health of the company I direct is so important to me. I am deeply invested in the role and purpose of live performing arts in my home city, and I work every day to ensure that we are relevant and that OBT lives up to our mission statement to share, inspire, and connect to our community for decades to come, no matter what the challenges. Your recognition of the efforts of Oregon Ballet Theater and Portland Opera to find a creative and safe path to public performances, the resulting partnership with OMSI with the support of Jordan Schnitzer and the CARE Foundation is particularly impactful at this critical junction in our emergence from the COVID-19 pandemic. No one is taking any victory laps at this point. We are still very much in the thick of our navigation out of the darkest hours of fundamental, even existential challenge. We can see that there is light ahead of us, and we continue to cautiously but definitively move forward. For what other choice do we have? So the attention you're paying to us today, to both the organizations, carries significant symbolic weight. Oregon Ballet Theater is a modest regional ballet company, albeit one with an outsized national stature, but at the same time, it is a major connector in our beloved city. We employ hundreds of artists, artisans, technicians, musicians, and craftspeople each and every, in parentheses, normal year, and our work touches the lives of tens of thousands in the metro area, from preschoolers to the retired. Our work, our industry is employed not to enrich an individual or a family or a group of shareholders, but rather to enrich the community we ourselves are part of in ways that may be hard to quantify, but are no less tangible than the dividends you might see on a portfolio report. Our 6 performances at the soon-to-be inaugurated Jordan Schnitzer CARE Summer Stage on the OMSI lot between OMSI and the Telecom Crossing include world premiere ballets by our resident choreographer, Nicolo Fante, and New York-based choreographer, Jennifer Archibald, as well as appearances by our young aspiring dancers of OBT2. We dance and share our art with open, full to bursting hearts, and breathe deep lungfuls of rejuvenating air, grateful for the notice you pay to us with this proclamation. And finally, on my behalf, I implore you, as the leaders you are, to look to the performing arts as levers to pull and as partners to join with, so that we may continue connecting all of us to each other and to the city we all call home, this beautiful city. We are surely part of what makes Portland great, and we want more than ever to play a role in the Portland Renaissance we can sense is right around the corner. That's it for me. Unfortunately, Sue Dixon had to sign off and asked if I would read. I'm going to read an abbreviated version of her remarks. It's been a long morning, now stretching into afternoon. So on behalf of Sue Dixon, General Director of Portland Opera, thank you, Mayor Wheeler and City Council members, for this proclamation and for inviting us to speak here today. All of us at Portland Opera are delighted to be able to perform for a live audience for the first time since February of 2020 with our production of Robert Sevier Rodriguez' vibrant opera, Frida. So much has happened during the last 15 months. This has been a difficult time for our community and our arts and cultural institutions. So we wanted to lift each other up in partnership. Our friends at Oregon Ballet Theater were looking for a way to share their beautiful works safely, and so we worked together to imagine a venue that could be shared between dance and opera. Our neighbors at OMSI needed space for their summer camps to help students return to hands-on learning, and we were looking for a safe outdoor performance venue. Together, we are partnering to share these resources. This is an incredible opportunity for all of us to collaborate together. Now, more than ever, it is important to support our local businesses and arts organizations, big and small, and to show up for one another. It's time to get so many in our creative sector back to work, and we could not be more excited to do so. I'm skipping. In terms of Frida, the story is brought to life by the beautiful music of Mexican-American composer Robert Xavier Rodriguez, and each evening will begin with a performance by the talented young dancers of Ballet Folklorico. Thank you again, Mayor Wheeler and City Council, for inviting us to speak and for supporting our organizations. We hope to see you at the Opera, and I will add, for me, we hope to see you at the ballet as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you so much, Kevin, for being here. It is exciting to know that Oregon Ballet is back and will be performing live. I think the hardest part of COVID for me has been missing out on live performance, whether it's dance or music or whatever. I'm really, really excited that you are on the path back. And that this summer you're coming out very strong. I look forward to what you produce this year, and as we move into the future and get dancers back to work and back actually inspiring the rest of us non-dancers. And I didn't know that much about your background before, Kevin. And let me just say how honored we should be that you chose to make Portland your home. When people can live anywhere on the planet and they choose Portland, to me, that makes them very special people. So thank you so much for the energy and the inspiration that you bring to your role. And I just can't wait to see the next performance.
Thank you. Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for bringing this forward, and also Kevin for your comments. And thank you to the Portland Opera and Oregon Ballet Theater for your creative work to address the challenges of these times. I think I'm not the only one who has missed during this time live performances tremendously over the last 15 months. The way a community comes together in the moment around performance, it's such an important part of who we are as humans, not only just seeking connection, but also to really appreciate the beauty that artistic performance brings to all of us. And it's really a defining part of our city and really who we are as Portlanders. And it's such a huge part as well of our local economy. And it's a vital contributing sector to our cultural fabric as well. So I'm very thrilled by the prospect of live performance returning. And I'm really excited specifically by the partnership between two of our city's defining artistic institutions. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, colleagues. Like everyone else, I am delighted to join you in declaring June Portland Opera and Oregon Ballet Live Performance Month. I'm delighted to hear that Portland Opera and Oregon Ballet Theater will start performing in front of people again soon. And I'm really excited about the venue. It's incredibly creative to move your performances out of a theater and into the open spaces on the Oregon or OMSI campus. Just very great work. There are 3 performances that I hope that I get a chance to check out. Can't wait to see the Portland Opera's performance of Frida. That sounds amazing. I don't know if we had a chance to mention the ballet performances that are coming up. I believe there are 2. First, there's Choros, which is described as a performance that combines movement, rhythm, and gesture with music and has the unique quality of transforming space with the physical body. Also, I think there's a second performance called Sculpted Clouds, a dance that explores questions like, what does a revolution in consciousness look like? And how do we look at our Earth today? So if After 15 months, you owe your sweetheart a legit date night. These are some pretty good options. If you want to get tickets, you can visit the websites for Oregon Ballet Theater or the Portland Opera. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for bringing this forward today. I was so delighted when I saw it on the agenda. And Kevin Irving, thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. I saw that you tuned in earlier with Sue Dixon, and you did a really remarkable job channeling Sue Dixon, and none of us would want that challenge. So as a former Oregon Ballet Theater employee, one of your alums, I'm delighted to come and attend the performances. I've always say that it's arts and sports that bring a community together. And so we need you. We need you to be strong, Oregon Ballet Theater. It's such a good story. And I can't believe you've been here 8 years. I have to admit that that surprised me. And you have been doing such good work. And you've really made the Oregon Ballet Theater more inclusive. You've been focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion work. And I don't think you get enough attention or praise for that, but I've noticed, and I really appreciate it. Anyway, I'm looking so forward to attending Frida and also attending Oregon Ballet Theater performances. You know, I come any chance I can get anyway, but I'm just so happy to know that you're back and you never left. And the arts organizations that have survived COVID and are able to start doing performances again truly are remarkable stories of resilience. So I thank you on behalf of the City Council that we could be helpful as you come back. And thank you to the many, many dancers. Oregon Ballet Theater employs more young working artists than any arts organization in the city. And I think sometimes that doesn't get enough attention either. They actually live and they make this their home while they're part of the ballet theater. You don't just fly them in. So I think it's really important to remember that Oregon Ballet Theater is a homegrown organization. And anyway, if it wasn't for arts, the one bumper sticker I'll put in my car is "Art Saves Lives." So thank you again for being here, and everyone's looking forward to celebrating with you soon.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Both the Portland Opera and the Oregon Ballet Theater have been at the cultural forefront of our city for a long, long time, exposing Portland to world-renowned composers such as Philip Glass, who recorded 2 albums at the Portland Opera, and also to work with various renowned choreographers such as Nicolo Fonte, Daryl Grand, Moultrie, and Helen Pickett, all of whom had world premieres at the Oregon Ballet Theater. Evenings of passion, no regrets in the morning. That's a favorite Portland Opera tagline among patrons, represents productions that the Portland Opera puts on each year, including those by Puccini, Verdi, and Mozart, their 3 most often performed composers. When you go to the Portland Opera, you can often expect to see a production in numerous languages besides English, including Czech, French, German, Italian, Latin, Russian, and Spanish. The Oregon Ballet Theater is also a passionate performer of the arts. It quickly grew to have a couple hundred ballets in its repertoire, including many evening-length classics, masterpieces from the 20th century, and even groundbreaking contemporary pieces. The Oregon Ballet Theater has also featured at least 20 world premieres since its founding in 1989. Moving forward, both the Portland Opera and the Oregon Ballet Theater have committed themselves to fostering partnerships with each other and with regional arts organizations and artists, including Pink Martini, the Portland Art Museum, the Multnomah County Library, and many more, to find ways to ensure that artists can continue their craft safely while sharing their incredible gifts to Portland and indeed the rest of the world. And so with that, I will now read a proclamation on behalf of the council. Whereas collaboration and mutual support during challenging times is the hallmark of a great city. And whereas Oregon Ballet Theater and Portland Opera joined together to creatively address seemingly insurmountable challenges to performing in front of a live audience with the safety and comfort of artists, audience, and staff top of mind. And whereas with support and encouragement from partners OMSI and the Harold and Arlene Schnitzer Care Foundation and Travel Oregon. And whereas in June 2021, OBT and the Portland Opera take to the Jordan Schnitzer Care Summer Stage to share the pure joy of performing in front of a live audience with the patrons who will share the memory of a lifetime. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim June 2021 to be Portland Opera and Oregon Ballet Theater Live Performance Month in Portland, and encourage all residents to join in this observance. Thank you all. Appreciate it. And with that, colleagues, we will take a 10-minute recess. We will reconvene a little bit before 5 minutes to 1 and continue the remainder of our regular agenda. We are in recess. anyway. Keelan, are you back yet? Keelan, hello. So Keelan wrote it down, Commissioner Hardesty, and took me very literally. She's like, I'm not coming back 1 second early.
That's right. Well, we got 3 more minutes then.
I'm sorry, I'm here.
Likely story, Keelan, likely story. Keelan, could you read, we're all back now, this city council's back in session. Could you please, do we have—
Recording in progress.
There it is, recording in progress. Okay. Could you read 416, please?
Yes. Accept bid of McClure and Sons, Inc. for the Columbia Boulevard Wastewater Treatment Plant Organic Waste Receiving Facility Project for $7,067,866.
I'm going to pull this back to my office, colleagues, without objection. 417, please.
Accept bid of MJ Hughes Construction, Inc. for the Northwest Cornell Tunnel Rehabilitation Project for $2,773,237.
Well, colleagues, as the name might suggest, this is a procurement report to execute a construction contract for the Northwest Cornell Tunnel Rehabilitation Project. This project will focus on increasing public safety through increased visibility and structural integrity of the tunnel system. It will demolish the existing tunnel lining, add new reinforced concrete lining, rehabilitate minor maintenance issues of Eastern Northwest Cornell Road tunnel lining, and upgrade the tunnel lighting systems. The Interim Chief Procurement Officer, Kathleen Brenes-Marua, will present the report. Kathleen, if you are here, yeah, there you are. Welcome and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mayor and Commissioners, for the record, I'm Kathleen Brenes-Marua, Interim Chief Procurement Officer, and I'm here to recommend authorization to enter into a contract with MJ Hughes Construction for the Northwest Cornell Tunnel Rehabilitation Project. On June 17, 2020, Council authorized procurement services to solicit the project. At that time, the engineer's estimate was $3,180,000, and the confidence level was moderate. Procurement services issued an invitation to bid on March 5th, and bids were opened on April 8th, and 4 bids were received. MJ Hughes Construction submitted the lowest responsive bid in the amount of $2,773,237, which is approximately 13% under the engineer's estimate. The city's aspirational 20% subcontractor and supplier diversity goal applied. McClure and Sons, MJ Hughes has committed to subcontract 25.99% to firms certified by the state's Certification Office for Business Inclusion and Diversity, as identified in the report before you. They're self-performing 35.25% of the work and subcontracting the remaining 38.76% to non-certified firms. MJ Hughes Construction is in full compliance with all city contracting requirements, and I hereby recommend that Council accept this report and authorize execution of the contract. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Project manager is also in attendance.
Director Brenes-Marua, I neglected to mention something. Somebody had emailed me last night that they'd want me to say, and of course I forgot because I have a just-in-time brain apparently. So the tunnel will be closed obviously to auto traffic during its renovation. It's my understanding bicycle and pedestrian traffic will still be allowed. Is that accurate?
That is my understanding, yes.
Very good. And how long do you expect the rehabilitation project to take? In other words, how long will Cornell Road be closed? Or do we know yet?
I will ask the project manager to step in.
Hey, good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Our scheduled timeline is to start July and be complete November.
Garen, can you do me a favor? Thank you for that answer. Can you also just state your name for the record?
Joran, project manager with PBOT.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. That actually is a lot faster than I would have thought. Well done. Good. I don't see any other questions at the moment. If none, I'll entertain a motion. I was going to say a bid, but that's not right. We don't do that. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Commissioner Hardesty to accept the report. Anyone want a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rubio seconds the report. Keelan, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The report's accepted. Good luck with that. 418 is the second reading.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and award of 5 contracts to provide vehicle upfitting services for a 5-year term and total amount not to exceed $5 million.
Colleagues, this is a second reading. We've already heard a presentation on this. We have also had opportunity for public testimony. Is there any further business on this item? Seeing none, Keelan, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
I thought that was a great presentation last week, and I just want to acknowledge both the partnership between different bureaus and frankly, the smart thinking, which will lead, I believe, to a reduction in the cost of upfitting. So good work, all who were involved in this. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item is 419 from the Housing Bureau.
Authorize new construction financing for an affordable housing project to be developed by a Northwest Housing Alternatives affiliate in amount not to exceed $19,786,343.
This is an emergency ordinance. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, Emmons Place is another project that weaves capital funds from Portland's housing bond with funding from the Joint Office for Homeless Services to provide housing for supportive services for our most valuable residents. For most of the 3 decades, Susan Emmons has been a leader, an advocate for the most vulnerable members of our community, and is a longtime executive director of Northwest Pilot Project, chair of Portland's Housing and Community Development Commission, and co-chair of the Metro Supportive Housing Services Oversight Committee. She has been involved for decades and continues to be so. And throughout her career, Susan challenged elected officials and city leaders to make needed community investments to protect older adults who lack safe, affordable places to live. Investments targeted with impacting this population allows low-income seniors to age in place and grow older with their community. In the spirit of Susan's enduring commitment to safety, stability, and dignity of the most vulnerable among us, Emmons Place, named in her honor, will provide 144 units of safe, affordable homes and culturally responsive supportive services for seniors, for veterans, for communities of color, and for individuals living with disabilities in a thriving, amenity-rich Northwest District. The Emmons Place project leverages its amenity-rich location to meet the critical housing needs of vulnerable Portlanders in Northwest Portland. Additionally, this project will convert the existing historic Buck Prager building from office to residential use and seismically retrofit this currently unreinforced masonry building. In fact, this project was awarded the Historic Landmark Commission's Project of the Year in 2019. With all of that, I turn it over to Director Callahan for the presentation. Take it away, Director Callahan.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. It is truly my pleasure to provide you with an overview of the Emmons Place development. The Emmons Place is one of 12 housing bond projects, which is under development. Keelan, I can't tell if the PowerPoint is up or not. Would you mind putting that up for me? The Emmons Place is one of 12 Portland housing bond projects, which will in combination house thousands of Portlanders in new affordable homes. This development will join 2 already in operation and 6 others under construction. I'm just going to proceed as if the PowerPoint's up. And again, I'm sorry, I can't see it for some reason.
I'm sorry, Director Callahan. I don't believe our office received it. If you could have staff send it to us, we'll bring it up as soon as we receive it.
Oh, goodness. Okay. I may just have to go without the PowerPoint because I think a lot of folks may have actually taken their lunch break. So hopefully council is okay with that, and my apologies.
That's fine, Director. You just give us vivid descriptions in the most specific manner you possibly can.
Okay.
Extra credit for performance art.
Thank you. I'm not sure if that's my strong suit with performance art, but when we go to Trell Anderson, I'm sure he'll take up that mantle. So the Emmons Place will be developed, owned, and operated by Northwest Housing Alternatives. And as you heard, will honor the work, commitment, and compassion of Susan Emmons. Northwest Housing Alternatives has worked through a significant number of land use hurdles to be able to preserve and expand on the site, to bring much needed affordable housing to Northwest Portland, ensuring that Portland seniors that are living on our streets and in our shelters will have the peace, security, and comfort to thrive. It is truly a fitting building to honor the work of Susan Emmons, who, as Commissioner Ryan noted, has really made her life's work the dedication of affordable housing for seniors. And the Emmons Place, as the commissioner noted, is being reused and added to. The Buck Prager building will add additional housing in a 4- and 6-story configuration. The project is located in the heart of Northwest Portland at Northwest Hoyt and Northwest 18th. Of the 144 units, 48 units will provide permanent supportive housing for seniors who have previously been homeless. In addition to the capital funding from the Portland Housing Bureau, these units are subsidized by rent support from Home Forward and supportive housing services from the Joint Office of Homeless Services. In addition to the supportive housing units, there will also be 30 units that will serve seniors with deeply affordable housing. That means that incomes at or below 30% of the area median income, which is just about $19,000 a year. So in total, 78 of the 144 units will provide much needed, deeply affordable housing. All units will be restricted for 99 years with rents starting at below $500 per month. The project will be targeting Earth Advantage Platinum with energy efficient features such as Energy Star appliances, and today, most importantly, air conditioning, plus durable finishes and materials. Once we receive council approval, this project will begin construction shortly and begin welcoming residents next fall. NAIA will provide resident and support services, employing a housing first model with case management and peer support focused on housing stability. On-site services will include mental health counseling, income support, wellness, and social connections, as well as access to culturally specific and supportive programming, including powwows and elder support groups. The Portland Housing Bond will provide just over $19 million of capital funding, which will leverage another $30 million to make this project possible, from sources like Key Bank, low-income housing tax credits, and Metro's transit-oriented development funds. As I mentioned, with your approval this morning or this afternoon, we'll move this project forward to financing and into construction. I would now like to turn it over to Mr. Trell Anderson, the Executive Director of Northwest Housing Alternatives, to share a few words. And while he's doing so, I may try to find a PowerPoint image of the project so you can see it in all its what it will be in all its splendor and glory. Trell, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you all hear me? Great. Thank you so much. Director Callahan, thank you for the introduction and the overview. Mayor Wheeler and council members, my name is Trell Anderson. I'm the Executive Director at Northwest Housing Alternatives. Northwest Housing Alternatives is a community-based, mission-oriented, nonprofit affordable housing development organization working in Portland, the metro area, and statewide. We currently have 2,000 units in our portfolio, and we have another 800 under construction in communities across Oregon. This is a very special project that started almost 5 years ago with the previous executive director, Clennon, and housing developer, Stephen McMurtry. And it really started with, as you can imagine, Susan Emmons working her network and introducing the property owner to Northwest Housing Alternatives. Thank you for recognizing Susan, all of you, and many of you may know her. We're so happy that she is a part of this project. And I just want to take some time here to offer some additional recognitions, because a project like this it requires so many people playing so many different and important and key roles. If you'll indulge me, please, I'd like to just start again by thanking Director Callahan and the staff at the Portland Housing Bureau. They've just been absolutely terrific in bringing this project forward, being patient, understanding what it takes to get a project like this underway, and also recognizing the coordination between the bureaus. We had to work through the historic design process with the Planning Bureau. BDS, of course, plays a role. And your legal team also, worked with our legal team through the whole process. It's really an integration of city bureaus that played very well in this project. I'd also like to thank Carlton Hart Architecture, our architect firm, and specialists that we had to hire for the historic review process, historic design process, Paul Falsetto. You may recognize some of his other work with the Ladd Carriage House, but it's important to recognize the very high skilled and detailed work that the good folks at Carlton Hart and Paul Falsetto were able to perform for us to get us through that historic design process. Not one challenge, not two challenges, but 3 challenges all the way up to LUBA, based on their excellent work. I want to thank our construction company, which is Bremick Construction. They've been with us the whole way. They have a specialty in historic preservation. And so, of course, they're informing us throughout that whole design process, and they are excited to get this project under construction. All the funders, we can't do it without a layering of public subsidies and public and private subsidies. KeyBank is playing a critical role, layering in different parts of the effort, including the construction loan, permanent financing. We have to do a couple of different bonds through the construction process with them, and they've just made it incredibly easy for us. Funding also includes 4% tax credits that are allocated and underwritten into the project through Oregon Housing and Community Services, Director Salazar there. Metro is contributing to this project. And then, of course, from the Portland Housing Bond, Portland Housing Bureau, Home Forward, and the Joint Office, as Director Callahan identified. The slideshow is up and running, and it, I think there are, yeah, it's going to look great. Our service provider partners, as Director Callahan mentioned, Native American Youth and Family Services, Paul Lumley and Oscar Arena are just terrific to work with. And we've been working with them for several years now, and so happy to have NAYA as part of this project. And then, of course, Northwest Pilot Project and Laura Galena de Lobato and her staff over there. Both are receive funding through the Joint Office and our homeless service provider organizations who are actively working every day to support people move from homelessness to permanent and safe and stable housing. And we're just delighted that they are joining us in this project. I want to thank one person in particular at Northwest Housing Alternatives, and that is Destin Verdun. He is our Director of Real Estate Development. As I said, this project didn't originate with Destin, but he just wrapped his arms around it, gave it a big hug, and has really carried it through all of its different scopes and processes. Lastly, but certainly not least, I want to thank each of you council members for your ongoing support for affordable housing, in particular, your support for developments sponsored by local community-based nonprofit organizations like Northwest Housing Alternatives. I think you'll notice that the deeply impactful service-enriched projects come from organizations like ours. One of our taglines is we put people before profit. And we're happy to bring projects like this to you and throughout communities across Oregon. So I offer you now Emmons Place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trell, and I appreciate that we've gotten a chance to see some of the beautiful images of the building to come. That officially concludes our presentation this morning.
All right, we have a question from Commissioner Hardesty.
I just actually want to just say, wow. Wow that we are preserving a historic building. Wow that we're going to have the highest energy standards available. Wow, this is truly affordable housing for seniors and other people who desperately need housing. You know, Shannon, I'm always, Director Callahan, I'm always challenged by like the multi projects. But when you bring projects like this to us, I'm just in awe. Because what I know is just how much time and energy and a whole host of resources that are required to bring a project like this through the stages it needs to go through to be ready for development. And so I just want to applaud you, your team. I want to applaud Terrell Anderson for his deep commitment to serving people who are low income and ensuring that they have quality housing to live in. I just can't say enough about this project. I was really looking forward to this being on the agenda. And I think we talked about how hard it is to pull all those financial pieces together to do a project like this. I think we've checked so many of the boxes preserving buildings that have a historic value in our community, bringing them up to a green standard. You've just checked so many boxes with this project. I'm in awe, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. If there are no other questions, Keelan, I'll ask, is there any public testimony?
No one is on the call for this item.
All right, good. Then with that, I will ask you to call the roll, please.
Ryan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that great presentation. You know, this project is one of many steps we're taking as a city to reduce chronic houselessness and provide deeply affordable housing, especially for seniors. I'd like to commend the development team for its commitment to bringing the project forward during very uncertain times. And this project also comes as a result of tremendous collaboration that you heard about. Our funding partners, our service providers, including the Joint Office, Key Bank and Affiliates, Oregon Housing and Community Services, and Northwest Housing Alternatives. Great to have you on, Mr. Anderson. And I'm glad you also mentioned NAIA. Thank you all for your efforts in bringing this inspiring project to fruition. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
I want to thank Northwest Housing Alternatives, Portland Housing Bureau, and their partners for this project, and particularly the great work of Terrell Anderson and his team. As a council, we've tried to see housing needs on a continuum and to make policy that supports Portlanders gaining greater security along that continuum. And I see this project as being very responsive to several different kinds of housing needs along this continuum on multiple levels. And I'm really appreciative of the thoughtful weaving in of sustainability goals and the culturally specific partners, and really glad to see that 48 units in this project will be solely dedicated to our houseless community. So I look forward to seeing this project come to fruition, and I hope to see more projects like this in the future. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
This is a great project. It's yet another one that we can all be proud of. It brings us together and supports an important value in our community around affordability and giving people access to a place to call home. I'm strongly supportive. This is easy for me to vote yes on, and the ordinance is adopted. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Thank you to the Housing Bureau for bringing this forward. Next up, our last item, actually, believe that or not, 420.
Revise transportation fees, rates, and charges for FY 2021-22, amend transportation fee schedule, and fix an effective date.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. We have before us the Portland Bureau of Transportation's fee schedule for the 21-22 fiscal year. PBAP performs an annual review of the fees and charges for transportation services. The fees are grouped by program areas, parking, transportation, land use, development, and regulatory, among others. Of note, PBAC continues to offer reduced fees or waives fees for programs focused on pandemic recovery, including the Healthy Business Program. Many fees are unchanged, with some fees slightly increased to reflect current costs, and staff is here and available to answer questions if anyone has any.
Colleagues, any questions? One from Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Mapps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If staff is here, I would be interested in just a quick overview on why some fees were kept the same and why others went up.
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Christine Leon with the Portland Bureau of Transportation. And with me this morning is Ty Berry, one of our high-level staff in our finance section, as well as some of our parking and regulatory folks. I am really honored to be here today and appreciate Council's review of our annual fees. The Bureau, as I'm sure you know, has a structural problem with our finances. And we certainly could use all the help we could, but coming out of the pandemic, coming out of the recession, we want to make sure that we are getting the right rates and charges out that matter to our customers and to the public. So we are going to continue to look at our rates and charges over the year, but one of the significant areas that have a structural issue is our development review fees. And so those will be going up to cover inflation, and there's just a couple others that are going to be going up slightly to cover a gap. So I hope that answers the question for you.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
All right, very good. Any other questions? Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one is on the call for this item.
All right, very good. It's an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Mapps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Thank you for your hard work on this. I know this isn't one of the more glamorous or sexy things we're doing today, but it's very important, and I appreciate and understand the hard work that goes into balancing the need to recover costs with making sure that the fees remain affordable. And so thank you for the hard work that went into this. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. And ladies and gentlemen, we have made it through another long council session. Thank you to everyone. Keelan, thank you for your great work. We are adjourned.